thanks. Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
On today's episode of the Scooby Panel, Nikki, Wendy, and Cameron meet Emmy-winning animation producer, director, and comic book artist, Scott Jeralds.
We're about to learn so much stuff about Scooby-Doo that we didn't know. Our minds are going to be blown by the time this is done, so this is going to be great.
Oh, we'll see.
Before we get into anything too crazy, can you let us know how you became interested in doing art?
It started out when I was about 3 years old, probably. My dad was a disabled veteran and he couldn't work. So at the time he was painting signs for people. He was an artist himself. And he started taking this art instruction school. It was a male course that he would take. And he had a little setup and he was trying to learn how to do stuff and do all the, I think it was based on one of those things. You ever seen the ads in magazines where it's like draw the pirate or draw Winky or something like that? I think that's what it was, to be honest. And but they sent a lot of cool stuff. I still have his T-square from that says art instruction school on it, so I still have that. But he had an interest in it and he drew, pretty realistic stuff for the most part. He drew some he loved to draw Droopy. That was his main cartoon thing he would draw. So then I became interested in it at that point, and I just started, I guess, from what my relatives tell me, I was always drawing, from the get-go. So, but I went a whole different route than my dad did, because he was like, like I said, he was into the, more like, more realistic stuff. And like I said, calligraphy stuff was amazing. He used to letter trucks, like when they used to like paint doors on the side of trucks and stuff. And, at 8 years old, I would have to go out and hold the ruler for him, because he could only hold it with one hand and then try to, rule it off with the other one. And if I let that ruler slip a set, just a fraction of an inch, I would be, have to hear about it. But yeah, so I picked it up from him and I started just getting more into cartoons. I was a little more obsessed, I think, that he liked, because he was just like, he couldn't understand why I was so obsessed with it, because I was always watching cartoons and I was always drawing cartoons, always reading comic books. We had a ritual that I would go get my comic book every morning, which I'll explain later when we get into another part. But that's basically it. And I just started from there, and I just, looked at comic books and TV and stuff like that, and just, fell in love with the Hanna-Barbera stuff and just kind of emulated that style and kind of honed it from there, and didn't stop drawing all the way through. It's kind of weird because I was the only kid in my town that could really kind of draw that way. So it was kind of like I was, kind of a, an alienist, sort of like Alien, from that standpoint. But yeah, but that was about it. When I went to art school, though, I met everybody else that drew like me, so it didn't, like I stepped on the mothership at that point, so it was different. But anyway,
that's awesome. And I mean, you have an amazing career, so it worked. It worked.
Yeah, it did. It's I guess because I was trained in for it since I was like 3 or 4 years old. So that's that was part of it, I guess. Yeah.
And can you walk us through your career?
Okay. Yeah, I went to well, like I said, just self-taught stuff, all the way through high school and everything, and through grade school and high school. I found out about CalArts, California Institute of the Arts, when I was in high school. And my art teacher gave me a pamphlet about it. And we wrote to all the studios. We wrote to Hanna-Barbera. We wrote to Disney. She even wrote to Marvel Comics because I wanted to draw comic books. And we got all these really nice letters saying, well, it wouldn't be advantageous for Scott to come out here because, he's in Illinois, where I'm from. And it wouldn't really be advantageous for him to move to California just to, to come and, take art. Because Hanna-Barbera was offering an art class at that point. And so I got these nice little rejection letters. I still have them. I'm probably going to frame them at some point. But so I knew about CalArts. My high school art teacher gave me a pamphlet about it, and I knew what they wanted. And there was at one point where my teacher came to my house and told my dad they're having a portfolio day up in Chicago. He should really be taken to that because, you know, he's got potential and at least he can find out what it takes to get, you know, to get into the school. And my dad was like, we're not going to Chicago. I'm not driving to Chicago because it was like a 6-hour drive and he just wouldn't do it. So I was like, and he's like, well, ask my art teacher, can you take him? Well, I can't take him. I'm like, okay, then I'm, you know, that's it. So I didn't even think about it. Then later on, I started thinking more about it when I went to community college down in Southern Illinois, which is about 2 hours from where my hometown is. And they had the same pamphlet that I had. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. So I did a portfolio, you know, based on the pamphlet, all these little like quick life studies and little sketches of, you know, and trying to figure out what they wanted. So I put it together. I put a portfolio together and sent it in and got rejected. And I was depressed. I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And then my dad had just passed away at the time too. So it was like, you know, I had depression on top of depression. But it was like, okay, well, that's not going to work. And then I spent the next few months like just redoing my portfolio. I did a storyboard that I wanted to do because I was always kind of messing around doing like comic books, and I did my own stories as a kid. You know, like my mom would buy me notebook paper, and I would make like every page of notebook paper would be part of the story, so that, you know, be like a comic book, so you could, you know, I'd staple them together. But I actually did a storyboard. I went and bought a storyboard pad, and I did a storyboard of a little film that I wanted to do, and then I did a bunch of life sketches. I went out and sat in the mall for like a couple of days and just drew stuff, and then I sent that off, and I got about maybe 3 or 4 months later, I got this big fat letter saying you're accepted. And I was like, wow, okay, now I can start my life. So when I finally got to CalArts, I I saw the class that I applied to the first time, and I know why I didn't get accepted, because those people were phenomenal. And I was just like, wow, then the class I was with, I mean, there was a lot of talented guys in it, but it's like I kind of fit in with them. And the class that was above me was kind of a, you know, a little more preppy, you know, a little more like the Animal House situation, where they were like, you had the preppy fraternity, and then you had the Animal House fraternity. So we were kind of the Animal House guys. And but that worked out okay. So then from CalArts, I went there for 2 years. And my second year, I kept trying to figure out how to get hired. And my second year, I just stumbled across, well, I had a couple of interviews that it didn't go well. I was kind of in and out the door beforehand, because they were like, okay, you know, I mean, going to CalArts kind of got me in the interview in the first place. But then I heard that there was a job at DEAC Enterprises. And so my interview was supposed to be at 2:00, but I jumped in the car at 11 and went down there. And I got there before the other people did. And I showed them my portfolio, and literally walking down the sidewalk from one building to another, because they were on Ventura Boulevard. There was like, they had like 2 buildings. One was like an old fashioned store, or an old like department store that they renovated. And from walking from there down to that renovated fashion store, department store, I got hired on the sidewalk. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And I was only making like, I think like $400 a week or something like that, you know. But the guy who was my producer, I got hired on Get Along Gang. That was my first show. And I have this thing where I call these come and go shows. It's shows I've worked on that only last like 1 season. So that was a come and go show. But this guy, his name was Cullen Blaine, and he was kind of like my mentor. I mean, he's the one that really kind of pushed me to do what I needed to do in order to stay employed. And he'd been around for a long time and worked everywhere, you know, mostly Hanna-Barbera and DePatie Freeling and places like that. And I was sitting in his office, and what I was hired to do was just like character design on Get Along Gang. And he already had the characters kind of designed by somebody else for presentation. So I just kind of took those and made model sheets out of them, which I didn't know how to do, but I did it anyway. And he's like, I was in his office one day, because they were really strapped for space. So I was sharing a desk in his office. And he turned around and he goes, have you ever done a storyboard before? And I'm like, no. And he goes, well, here, take this script and try it. I was like, okay. So I did like 2 or 3 pages of script, and I showed it to him. He's like, you've never done one of these before? And I'm like, no. He goes, well, you're going to be doing a lot of them now. So that was kind of like my launch. And then he started to, showing me how to like set up doing I was helping him do freelance stuff for other, for other studios and things like that. For Ruby Spears, we worked on Saturday Supercade and Alvin and the Chipmunks and stuff like that. So I would block him out and he would clean them up. And it was just like, the ball started rolling at that point. I was at DEEC for 9 months. And they were kind of done with Get Along Gang, and they didn't really know what I was going to do. I did a lot of presentation work for like Ghostbusters and Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling and a couple shows like that. And it just looked like I wasn't going to be able to stay there. So I started chopping myself around pretty quick. And I went to Hanna-Barbera, where I met Iwo Sakamoto for the first time. And then I went to Marvel because they had an opening for storyboard on Muppet Babies. And so my interview with Iwo went kind of quick. He brought me in and I showed him a lot of stuff from my portfolio, and I had a bunch of like collage drawings of Hanna-Barbera characters, and he looked at those and goes, well, that'd be real. This is pretty nice if they were on model. I'm like, wait, what? And I was like, how dare you? I've been drawing these characters since I was like 4. So that didn't really ring, but he wanted me to, he tried to get me in a position in the layout department with Charlie Grosvenor. It was like, it just didn't feel right. And I knew the Muppet Babies was more of a high profile show. So I decided to take that job instead, even though I loved Hanna-Barbera and everything about it. But I started doing freelance for Hanna-Barbera while I was doing storyboards on Muppet Babies. So I would go home at night after an 8-hour day. I'd go home at night and I start doing storyboards for Hanna-Barbera. And on the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. And but yeah, Muppet Babies, I was there for 2 years, and then I went to Hanna-Barbera after that, because Muppet Babies went on a hiatus, and I'm like, I didn't want to stay at Marvel, so I went to Hanna-Barbera. And again, my first job for Hanna-Barbera was like, I hadn't even quit Marvel yet, and I was like, I had this conflict with what they had me working on, and I was trying to get to go to Hanna-Barbera anyway, because I had done so much stuff for them and they really liked my work and they really liked what I was doing. So I want to be there now. So I went there and I hadn't cleaned out my desk at Marvel. They hired me on the spot and I hadn't cleaned out my desk at Marvel. So they said, we have a project that we want you to do with Iwo right now. And I'm like, well, I have to go clean my desk out at Marvel and I'll be back at lunchtime or after lunch. Like, well, okay. So I went there and told Marvel I was quitting. I packed up my box and I went over to Hanna-Barbera and I went over to Iwo. And the same thing, he gave me this project to do that was all the classic characters. It was Yogi, it was Boo Boo, Huckleberry Hound, and Quick Draw McGraw. And it was called the Trio of Triumph, and they were superheroes. And he gave this to me, and I'm like, no problem. I've been drawing these characters for a long time. So I went over and just whipped them out, and I took it back over to him. He goes, yeah, these would be really great if they were on model. I was like, okay. So he put a piece of paper over it, and I was like, really? He put a piece of paper over it and redrew them, changing stuff just a fraction of an inch, but it made all the difference in the world. And he showed me how to draw those characters. So I had nothing to say. And I admired him forever because, again, going back to a kid, he was like the first name I really noticed it was on Scooby, on the Where Are You show. He was production designer. I'm like, that sounds like a really cool job. At 9 years old, I'm like, that's that guy's name. That's an odd name, but I think I'd like to do that. So anyway, ended up working behind him for like 20 something years, watching him go over all my drawings, telling me how things were on model. But there was a couple of times though, I did draw Yogi Bear a couple of times where he was like, yeah, what you did here is fine. I'm like, what? Wait, what? So I was surprised about that. Then after Hanna-Barbera, I went to MGM and worked on the Pink Panther, the one where he talks that everybody hates. But I worked on that for 2 years. And then I went to Warner Brothers and I was made a director right away. And then a couple years after that, I was a producer and director on a lot of stuff after that. And after that 12-year stint, then I went to Porchlight and worked on Secret Saturdays for Cartoon Network. And I was a supervising producer and a director on that as well. And that's it in a nutshell. I worked on a lot of freelance stuff. There's a lot of shows I worked on, in between that, like things that I don't even know if I got credit for it because I'm like, well, I'm working for somebody else. I can't really put my name on this. But it worked out okay, you know.
That's a great career. I mean, you've done a lot.
Yeah, and that we're not even talking about the comic books and storybooks and merchandise and all that other stuff I've done in between. But yeah, but I was in, you know, at Hanna-Barbera, that was the most fun I had. You know, I was there for a year, and then they made me design supervisor, and I was there for the rest of the time I was there. I was there for about 10 years, and I mean, everybody I was working with, I all of a sudden was their boss, and I was like, oh, okay. And there were guys that had been there like 30 years, and I was like, you know, I'm this 27-year-old kid trying to tell them what to do, you know. But it was fun. You know, Jane Barbera was like the best boss I ever had, and she had a lot of faith in me to put me in that position when she did. So I'm forever grateful for that. And it was exactly what I wanted to do. It was the best job in the world. I just loved it. It was such a family being there, you know, just a family atmosphere. Working with Bill and Joe, you could just go into their office anytime and talk to them that you wanted to. And they took me under their wing. Ewo took me under his wing and showed me what to do. And it was the best of worlds. It was really good. Like, I mean, I learned more there than I learned at CalArts, to be honest. I mean, it was like, you know, it was just a really good training ground.
You brought up Ewo. What was it like working with him?
Well, it was, I'm at a loss for words. It was everything I wanted it to be. When I first met him, it was very much a student-teacher relationship with him, where it would be like you didn't speak until you were spoken to type, and he was very, very disciplined. When I first started, like that first project I did, be honest, he wasn't that keen on what I did for presentation, because what you would do is like, you know, you work basically from like maybe January to like October, and then all the work was done, you get laid off around the holidays, and then they bring you back. But if you were really good, you got to stay there and do presentation, you know, for the next season's shows. And that's something I really wanted to do because I love that presentation artwork that they did. So, like I said, he wasn't really keen on what I did at first because that first project I just told you about. But his son, who worked there as well, he went and talked to Ewo and he said, you don't realize how much this guy loves Hanna-Barbera stuff and knows everything about it. So he would really be someone that would, like, you know, do a lot better, you know, if you just showed him what you needed. And I guess that convinced him, because then I became like almost like Ewo's assistant at one point, and was doing all the stuff for him. That was even before I got to be design supervisor. And but when I was made design supervisor, when Jane took him around, he was like, that's a great idea. I'm glad you did that, because it, you know, made his job a lot easier too, because he knew I'd stay on top of stuff. So, but it was like I said, he was very much student teacher stuff. And it was like, you know, and again, I was so blown away by everything he did. I mean, he never, when I would watch him draw, it was like when I thought he was going to go right, he would go left. And it was like he would just change something a fraction of an inch, like I said, and it would just make all the difference in the world. I always told him he made my drawings look the way I envisioned them to be before I finished them. And but like I said, after we all left Hanna-Barbera and we all went different ways, we all ended up at Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers bought Hanna-Barbera, and Ewo ended up on the same floor that I was. So he would be just kind of tooling around, and he'd stop by my office and just start talking. And then I was like, what, huh? You know, because we don't have this relationship. Why are you talking to me like this? You know? And it was like, it came from like teacher-student relationship to like, what'd you watch on TV last night? Or I'm going to go to this play tonight and I've got front row seats. And he's always, you know, or I'm going to go on a cruise. And I'm like, wait, what? You know? So it just became that kind of relationship, and we got to be really, really good friends. And then when I got projects that, you know, at Warner Brothers that, you know, I could involve him in, from Static Shock all the way down to the Scooby-Doo DVDs that we did, and Tom and Jerry and stuff like that, I had him right beside me. I mean, we just, you know, did everything with him. And I actually gave him back his production design title that he had back in the day. And he's like, I don't think you can do that because I'm not in the union anymore. I'm a vice president. And I'm like, I don't care what you are. You know, you deserve this because this is what this is how I knew you from, when I was a little kid. So, but I could go to him for anything. I could go to him for life lessons. I could go to him for drawing lessons. I mean, he was such a knowledgeable guy. I just hung on every word. And, he'd always just kind of like stroll down to my office and just see how things are going and lean up in the doorway and talk. And then he'd come in and sit down and, whether I had anything to do or not, if I'm like pressed up against the wall with a deadline, he'd still sit there and just talk to me while I was drawing. So it was great. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better. I mean, I was very intimidated by him in the beginning, but then when he came around and became such a good friend, I treasure, every moment with him. So, because it was just, I learned so much, I mean, standing behind somebody for 20 years and watch them go over your drawings, and you do pick up a few things. And he did show me how to draw that dog, probably better than I should know how to draw. So, he did. And he was really, seriously, the only one that could really draw Scooby, because it's his character. I mean, it's just, but he showed me what you could do with him and what you couldn't do with him and what you shouldn't do with him. And there wasn't a whole lot he couldn't do with him. So he showed me all the ins and outs and the tricks of that. So that's I kind of hung on to that. And just like I said, whenever I try to stop doing Scooby, they just keep dragging me back in to do something else. And I don't mind. It's good. It works.
It's nice, like for us, because you are such a Scooby fan, and having you work on Scooby, we know that you're going to like do great things with it, and you're going to stay true to Scooby.
Well, I try to. Yeah. I mean, the integrity of that is really important to me. I mean, what they kind of do with it, off and on, depending on who's on it and who they throw on it. I don't, sometimes I have issues with that. But that's just personal taste, it's not necessarily, I don't like the direction that they take it sometimes, because some of the stuff that is kind of tossed off as like, late night, show humor that they make about those characters that has become like canon, and I don't really appreciate that, because that's not what those characters are. It's such an innocent thing, and the characters are they are what they are. There's no more to it than that. It's like when I was a kid and I'd watch Hanna-Barbera shows, they would do amazing things in 30 seconds that they would never explain, and you didn't care that they didn't explain it. I mean, like the Hair Bear Bunch had an invisible motorcycle that they would escape from the zoo. It's like, where did that come from? And how do they have that? And even when there was one scene one time where they jump on it and Hair Bear turns to the camera and he goes, I don't know how we do it, but we're doing it. And it's like, yeah. And I was all for that. They go in their cave and they hit a rock and all these things would spin out of the walls. And I'm like, that's great. Hong Kong Phooey jumping into the filing cabinet, or, and then coming out in the gi and everything. And then, then jumping down, the chute, going down and hitting the mattress and flying into the garbage can and coming out in the Phooey mobile. They didn't explain it. Nobody knows why Space Ghost had two wards and a monkey. Nobody cares. They don't know where he got his wristbands. I don't care. It's just the same thing applies to Scooby. You don't know why these four mismatched people are together solving mysteries, but they are. And it works really well because they always solve the mystery and they always get rid of the bad guy. And they all love each other. There's no, Fred and Daphne going off and doing whatever, and Velma being whatever she is, and Shaggy and Scooby being high and eating all the time. That doesn't exist. It is what it is. It's just a real simple little show that people have tried to, take into a different direction that just should never go, and when I did those two DVDs of mine, it's like, that was my thing. It's like, I want to do that as close as I can to get that 1969 show back, with the sound effects and the music and the voices and everything else. And that was my goal. Granted, I got some flack for it and some, it wasn't the easiest thing to do. They weren't really keen on it because of the success of those other movies that came prior to those. But they didn't want to do those movies that came prior to that anymore. They just decided that they wanted to take it in a different direction. I came up and I said, can I just do the show I grew up on? And they reluctantly agreed to it, but I did get to do it. And I'm very proud of those. I mean, I still watch them to this day and there's still things I'm like, should have done this or should have done that. But, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with them. you know, for the most part. I'm glad I got to do what I got to do on them. When I was there at the right place in the right time, I guess. Or I was just too stubborn to be told no. I don't know. I don't have that. I don't have those situations very often, but sometimes it works out. So yeah.
It is really cool that you got the original cast back together.
Yeah, that wasn't easy, but we did. You know, I mean, Frank was a given, you know, and then track down Nicole and Heather. And Casey had not done it for a while, and I keep hearing rumors that he had issues with the way that Shaggy was, with, you know, not being a vegan and eating meat all the time. And there's well, Shaggy's, you know, or Casey's a devout vegan, and he doesn't believe in, you know, all this, the way that, you know, crazy foods that Shaggy eats. And I'm like, I don't think so. So what I did is, when I got the script, I took the script and went to Casey's house, and I said, I want you to read over this because I want to make sure that you're okay with everything in it. And he always like, okay, I'll do it. I got invited up to his house, and we sat there, and he looked it over, and he's like, yeah, he said, this is fine. I'd be happy to do it. And I was like, well, there's 2 down. And then I got Heather, and that was 3. And then Nicole was a little bit tricky because she worked at a actors agency where she was an agent for actors. And I called her and she's like, well, I haven't done it for a long time. I'm like, yeah, I know, but you know, and then I guess the girls that worked in her office convinced her to do it. I mean, when I was on the phone, they were like, I could hear them yelling in the background. No, you have to do this. You have to do this. So she finally reluctantly agreed, and she didn't want to be recorded with the rest of the cast in the first one when we did Vampire. And she came in by herself, and she had this voice, and I was like, oh gosh, it's not going to work. She can't do it anymore. She doesn't even sound like Velma. And she got in the booth, and then all of a sudden there it came. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was like in tears. I mean, it was just amazing to hear her. And she hadn't done that voice for 25 years at that point. So it was really good to hear, you know, come back and do it. And then when we did Monster of Mexico, I got the whole cast together in one room to do that. And I was just like, I had arrived. You know, I had pictures taken with them. I was like tap dancing. They couldn't believe it. The other problem that we had, though, in those movies, that we didn't have a Scooby voice. And because Don had passed away. And again, one of the highlights of my career was seeing Don Mezek and Casey on Pup Scooby. Well, actually, on 13 Ghosts, I got to see it too. To see those guys do those voices together and have them playing off each other, it was just like, ooh, you know. Didn't see Don Mezek play off anybody at that point. And I got to see him with Paul Winchell doing Dastardly and Muttley. I mean, that was a big one too. But anyway, so since Don had passed away, I was like, well, what are we going to do? And Frank actually sent me an audition tape as him doing Scooby. I was like, okay. And then I had Dave Coulier from Full House, played Uncle Joey. He sent me one as well. And I played them both back over and over and over and over, just for a whole day. I think I sat and listened. There's only like 5 lines that they were doing. I have the tape somewhere, and if I can find it, I'll send it along one of these days with you guys. But I just sat there and listened to it, going back and forth. I'm like, okay, who's really sounds like it? And then I thought, well, Frank was in the original show with Don, and if anybody can make it, you know, or know the nuances and everything he needs to do for that, then it would be Frank. So I went with Frank, and even I was pretty interested. Frank thanked me a lot for doing that. I'm like, well, it's okay. You know, I said, you know, and I explained to him, like, you know, you were in the original show and you know Don's, you know, ins and outs. But he was like, there were a few times where I had to like, okay, this is how Scooby sounds when he barks. And I would play Don's tape. And I'm like, I'm telling Frank Welker how to do a voice. And, you know, I mean, I know he's technically working for me, but I was like, if I'm overstepping my bounds here. But he would be like, oh, no, he's fine. And the one thing that Frank said, because Frank would just say a line or do something, and I would be on the floor. I'd be laughing so hard and behind the booth, you know, behind the glass. And that was the biggest compliment to me. Frank came up and told me one time, he said, you are the best audience for me. he said, I look up and I see you just falling apart. He said, that is the greatest compliment, so that I could pay to him, I guess. So anyway, he was very happy about that. And we became pretty close at that point too. And, but getting those guys all together, that was just a treat for me. And I just, again, trying to make that, I mean, other than not having Don there, and that was very sad, but, but I got as close as I could possibly get, I thought, so.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Really cool.
I love that picture of you with all the voice actors. It's just
Yeah. Can you tell I'm kind of happy in that picture? Yeah. Little bit.
but it meant something to you because you're a Scooby fan. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Wendy, do you have any questions?
Well, I think the biggest question in all of the Scooby community is, and Scott, I know you know the answer.
Yeah.
Why is Shaggy's shirt red and his pants are blue in 13 Ghosts?
Yeah, I have no idea. No, I do know the reason for that. Mitch Schauer was the producer on that show. Tom Ruger was the story editor, and I think he was associate producer on it. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. But Mitch Schauer was a big fan of Vincent Price and a big, big fan of the Universal monster movies. And he was really interested in, because this show was taking a different direction, it was real monsters, it was real ghosts. It wasn't guys in a mask trying to, like get the oil off the land of, from, like an evil realtor or something like that. It wasn't that type of person. It was they were real ghosts. So he took that to heart. I mean, he's like, okay, we're going to make this a different show and a different, we're going to shoot some new life into this franchise. So he basically redesigned Daphne, gave her that little bobbed haircut, and gave her different clothes. And we had Flim Flam, and we had Vincent Price, which you should see. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the model sheets for 13 Ghosts, but we actually had real life like photographs of Vincent Price, and then we had Mitch's drawings, which Mitch is just one of the most amazing artists I've ever seen. Just, I mean, and doesn't rough anything out. He just starts drawing, and it's like, how do you do that? But he's an amazing artist. And I worked with him for quite a while on a lot of different projects. But anyway, he was, like I said, he was so I think because, and we had Scrappy, of course. We had Scrappy, which I loved. I thought Flim Flam and Scrappy kind of canceled each other out sometimes. Because I thought Scrappy could have handled that, the Flim Flam role, but they did whatever. Because ABC was like, we want a kid because we have to have a kid in order to relate to the other characters. I'm like, what? But anyway, that's the way that things were thought about back then. But anyway, to get back to your original question, Wendy, Mitch had done a redesign on Daphne, and he just didn't want that green shirt on Shaggy. That's as simple as that. And he made it red, and he made his pants blue. It was because he wanted to. I guess because he maybe thought the shirt was green and it would probably smell bad and he wore it for too many years or something. I don't know. But that was the reason. And that's the only reason. And everybody thinks there's just some great big, conspiracy theory around it. But that's it. Mitch changed it. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting about it, if you notice, and I'm sure you do because you guys have watched these things a million times just like I have, and I worked on a couple of them, on Boo Brothers and Reluctant Werewolf, which I did work on. I think I'm muted head on that one. And Ghoul School. So what happens in that case is whenever you have a current model of that character, and that's what it is, becomes that model, the girls from Ink and Paint go to the filing cabinet and they just pull out the latest model, and Shaggy happened to be in that red shirt and those blue pants, and that's what they went with for those 3 movies, because it wasn't that long after 13 Ghosts were done. So that's how he got to wear the clothes in that one too. But, when we did Zombie Island, we brought him back to, the green and the brown. So yeah. So that's it. That's there's nothing more to it than that. I'm sorry. I wish there were.
At least we know now. I mean, everyone, that has been like the burning question. I don't know how many people we have asked that on the panel before, and usually nobody knows. But yeah, it's a little anticlimactic, but hey, at least now we know. That's the best thing.
Sorry, it's the best I can come up with. So yeah, that's all I know. That's all I know. If you tie me to a chair and put a light over me and started dripping water on my forehead, I'd still tell you the same story.
So what I know you mostly from was all of your work in comic books.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, if no one has watched the Christmas panel yet, I mean, what are you waiting for? Like, come on, guys.
Exactly.
You should have watched that by now. But
Yeah.
so yeah, so my favorites of yours, of course, are the Archie series from the 90s.
Yeah.
Loved those growing up. Absolutely helped inspire me. My favorite one.
This
right
one?
here.
Oh,
Love it. Got matching ones. And Scott was kind enough to gift me the original drawing,
so cool.
which is very amazing.
Yep.
So
Well-
that is a process doing comic books. That's a very complicated process, and I'm not sure how you stomach other people inking and coloring your work. To be honest, I couldn't do it. I absolutely couldn't do it. I need too much control over that. But your artwork for those was amazing. It is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite comic book cover that you've done?
That I've done? You mean other than this one? Other than this one?
Other than that one.
Let me
We
tell
all
you.
know that that's the standard.
Let me tell you why. I know everybody I'm sure watched the Christmas panel, so that's fine. And you got to say what you want to say. But I got to tell you, when I was a little kid in Illinois, in central Illinois, a little small farm town in the Midwest, and I would sit and draw comic books forever, or not sit and draw, well, draw my version of comic books. But I would look at these comic books that I would get, and I would pour over every panel. And I know if I didn't like something, I would redraw it because that's the way I was. And so I poured over every panel of every comic book I had. So when I finally decided when I was fortunate enough to be a professional and draw comic books, I drew those comic books thinking that there's going to be some little kid in a farm town in the Midwest that's going to pour over every panel that I've done. And so I would trying to make it everything I could. But little did I know that person that was pouring over every panel that I drew lived in Canada, and she was a girl. And that's why that, when she wrote me and told me that she had that cover, or when we talked actually, and you told me that you love that cover, that's why you deserve to have that cover now, because I can't think of it going to anybody else that deserves it more. So,
well, thank you.
But anyway, now what was your original question to get back to about drawing comic books?
You have a favorite cover, or is there anything, that's it was such a long period of time, because after the Archie comics, then of course you worked when DC picked it up, and there was over 100 issues of that, and you did some interior stories and stuff, all of which were fantastic artwork. And always of note was that you drew the Scooby characters better than anybody. Even as a kid, I knew that, and I wrote a letter to the comic books commenting on that one time, that Scott Jeralds draws that Scooby gang better than anybody. And so, yeah, just give us some details about the comics, because comics are fun. We love animation, but comics are really great too.
Yeah, I can't really think of like any one cover that I did that was like my favorite. I mean, there's some that I'm more proud of than others. Depends on, again, like you said, the process of like you do something and then you're waiting on other people to kind of like, well, even back in the day before I even inked my stuff, I would just pencil it, send in my pages, and then hope for the best. It's just like animation. You put all your blood, sweat, and tears into storyboard and characters and everything. You send it overseas, and it's like when you send your kid to college, and did they use the tuition money to like party, or did they actually learn something? And it comes back, and you're like, oh no, So it's that way with comic books too, because you're kind of relying on other people to finish it off for you when you could do it, but they just have their stations of people that they use. There's a lot of covers, like I said. I mean, there's some that have turned out better than others. I can't really point to one that's just like my favorite. I mean, there's some that I like better than others, absolutely. There's some stories that I feel, that I probably spent a little bit more time on and put a little more detail in, on some that, I've kind of like gotten back to that a little bit more in the last, few months, actually, just, trying to put all that detail that I used to put into them, And, you know, and also that comes from DC, like pushing me too, like, oh, there's not enough detail in your background. So put every window in every building. I'm like, what? I'm trying to draw the characters and make those look like they're acting. And that's my focal point, you know, but they want to see a lot more detail. So I really try to make it look like especially when I draw Scooby comics, I try to make it look like a lost episode of the show as much as I can. Now, again, with the way it's finished off sometimes, I mean, I do my own penciling and my inking now. I have complete control over that. But I don't have control over where the word balloons go or what the color, you know, how the colorist does stuff. So that's kind of frustrating sometimes, you know, more than sometimes. But usually now, at least they give me the proofs to look at so I can, you know, get back to it. I think, you know, now that I think about it, some of the covers I did for the Scooby-Doo team ups I really liked. I mean, the Dashlane and Muttley one I liked a lot. Hong Kong Phooey one was pretty good. But nothing's coming to mind unless you guys know of one that you like and I'll go along with you. I'll be like, yeah, that's a good one, you know, but I can't think of anything right off the bat other than this one. This is still it, you know.
Well, that's the best one. There's no debating that.
That's true. That's probably that's my favorite then. It's been deemed my favorite.
So having done so many comics though, you now are making very cool sort of fake comic book covers. I like to call them fantasy covers. That word fake makes it sound.
No, yeah, I think I might change it over to that on my retro.
But what inspired you to do that?
There was actually, well, the Scooby-Doo team ups, you know, got me thinking about like, well, you know, Scooby-Doo teaming up with Quick Draw McGraw doesn't really make any sense to me, even though I drew that issue and I made it work as best I could. And I just took the Scooby characters and put them in his world, just like I did with Hong Kong Phooey and Dashlane Muttley and Penelope Pitstop. I didn't worry about them being in the Scooby world or being the Scooby characters. It's just like, this is them in that world. So then I started thinking about, and then there's this blog that I look at every day. It's called Super Family Team Up. And this guy takes DC and Marvel characters and meshes them together on covers. And he basically just takes covers that are already done and he'll just cut and paste other characters on it. And then he'll do another word balloon or a blurb or, you know, title and stuff like that. And I thought that's really cool. So that kind of got me thinking, you know, why not try to do that I was going to do that with just any cartoons, you know, like Filmation. I was going to team those characters up or any studio, but it's like, I'm so in love with Hanna-Barbera stuff. It's like, okay. And some of these shows are so similar. They're almost the same show with just different characters. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to kind of, you know, see how that works and how those characters interact in that same world. So that's kind of what my rules are, if I have any. You know, I don't really try to put like, you know, Space Ghost with the Jetsons. You know, I wouldn't really want to do that, you know, unless there was, I don't know, unless I hit my head on something or whatever. But I don't know. I just rather, you know, it's just, I just want to keep them in that same world. Cause like I did that one of, which is almost the same show. I did Yacky Doodle and It's the Wolf. And it's like, that's the same cartoon. It's just different characters. So to have them butted up against each other, it's like, well, they look like they belong together, you know, look like they came out of the same place, sort of, kind of. One's a little more stylized than the other. They're just stylized differently. But no, I really have a good time doing them. Some of them are really complicated. And it's like, you've got to stop putting this many characters in. You don't want to put the whole cast in. And it's like, I just did that Ku Klub and Buford Files one. I was like, my goodness, there's way too many people in this thing. But it worked, you know, it came out okay. But yeah, I'm having fun doing it. These have been like really drawings that I've had in my head probably for years. Because I actually thought about doing it a long time ago. I just never had the time to sit down and do it. But now I'm kind of like semi-retired and just kind of picking and choosing my own jobs that I want to do. So it's nice for me just to kind of get those drawings out of my head that have been there forever. And I've always wanted to do on the retro covers too. I always do like a TV show that never had a comic book, you know, or a cartoon that never had a comic book. So I've done a lot of those too. And that's fun because it's just like, well, and I try to do them in the style of like what year they came out and maybe what company would have actually have published it. You know, like Gold Key or Charlton or Dell, you know, or any of those, you know, the old. But again, I always look at the year that the cartoon was popular. And I'm like, well, this was where it would go, and you know, so. But yeah, I'm having a good time doing those. I am. It's just like I said, it's getting a lot of information out of my head that's been there for a long time. So that's important. And it's so funny. It's like half of them. some of them kind of turn out the way I envisioned it from the beginning, but for the most part, I'm really surprised, like, oh, that works, or that doesn't work. What am I doing, And then, you've been nice enough, Wendy, to like look at them too, because I've kind of hit you up for those a little bit. And you do go back to the, I love that when you used to put more detail into these comics covers. Why don't you do that anymore? So I've been reminded.
For the record, I've never phrased it like that, but okay.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've been very careful, even comparing myself to just a janitor that happens to be walking by while you're working.
Yeah,
like,
well,
oh, that's nice. What if you did this?
You're a little bit beyond that janitor level as far as what you can do. So that's the only reason I listen to you. So, but I really appreciate that. You kind of brought me back to where I needed to be with that stuff, and as far as thinking about it, that way. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
It's more
inspired me.
proof that you're a fan of cartoons because you put the characters with the other characters like so well. I mean, you choose them so well. They really fit together.
That's the other thing too, is like I really try, and you touched on this before about Scooby stuff, is like I really try to keep the integrity of those characters to what they need to be. I don't try to make them anything that they aren't. I try to draw them as accurately as I possibly can. Because that's what they look like. I see other people, it's great. Other people have their own styles and their own way of spinning them, and they draw those characters in their style, whatever that is. I don't know that I really have much of a style. I just try to like stay true to what I've seen on model sheets or in the show. And I mean, you can't really, sometimes the animation's so bad, you can't really take the show for what it's worth, because it's kind of, it's kind of off. But I do try to like really draw them as close as I possibly can to what they're supposed to look like. And maybe, if I have any kind of style whatsoever, it might just be more of composition or anything. But I really try to like pick characters that I think would like really go together, and make sense to be together instead of just randomly, like I said, throwing like, Birdman in with a Hair Bear bunch. I mean, that'd be like, what? So it's just, that's just the way I think about it. Yeah.
Well, you haven't mentioned one of your big career highlights yet, which is you have an Emmy.
The only other thing I ever won before I won my Emmy was when I was 9 years old. I won a drawing contest for my local movie theater was showing the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. And you had to draw a computer. So I drew a computer. And I won the 9-year-old level of that. And I got a free pass to the movie, and I got a free pair of tennis shoes for that. So that was pretty much all I won.
That's really cool though, for 9.
For 9 years old, I guess, yeah. But yeah, so the only thing I definitely wanted to win an Emmy before I was 30. And I came close. But it's like, but here it is. For Freakazoid, for directing on Freakazoid.
That's great.
Daytime Emmy Awards for 19, was it? Long time ago. I don't know. Oh, 1996, 97. So yeah, there you go.
Nice.
So well deserved.
Thank you. A lot of people have a lot more of these than I do, but I've got one, and I'm happy that I have that one. But I won a Humanitas Award for Static Shock. So I have that too, I was nominated for Emmys a lot, just never won them. But when I was on Muppet Babies, they gave us all certificates when we won. We won for, I think, 3 years in a row. So yeah, so I got those, have those hanging up. But the actual statue was what, that was a big deal.
Sure.
Yeah. But thanks for reminding me, because, kind of glazed over that in my career post, I guess. I'm sorry. Not that it didn't mean a lot. It did. So, yeah.
Was there anything that you missed out on doing in your career? Something that you wanted to do and maybe the opportunity sort of just flitted by you, or maybe you never got the opportunity to do it?
Well, I don't know. There's some stuff that, I mean, I did a lot, I did a lot of presentations for DVDs that never got picked up. when we were doing Scooby. I pitched a lot of those. But as far as, I've done pretty much everything I wanted to do, and I was just doing more of it every year. So it was like, I can't really say that there wasn't anything I didn't get to do, or any show that I really didn't get to work on that I wanted to work on, because I was pretty relentless when it came to, like, when I found something I wanted to do, I'd go for it. So yeah, I can't really think of anything I was like passed over for. There's some things I looked at other people, I'm like, why are they working on that? And I'm not, so I'd have that sometimes, but just part of it. Yeah.
Cameron, any questions?
Yes, I do. So first and foremost, I've always just loved the work that you've done on your comic books and the shows that you've worked on as well, even the movies. They've just been absolutely phenomenal. Two of my top favorite shows have always been A Pup Named Scooby-Doo and The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. So I have a couple questions on those. This isn't really actually it is a question. I'm going to start off with the comic book, since Wendy was talking about that with you. My favorite comic book of Scooby-Doo is The Pup Named Scooby-Doo, the Pizza Delivery from Beyond. And I love when you did that one. It's great. I've always wondered this though, and I'm glad I'm going to ask you this. Why was there only one issue? I mean, why was there only an issue of A Pup Named Scooby-Doo? Why was there only one?
Archie had a kind of a series that was set up where it was just sporadic. They would do like a one shot of a lot of different things, the different characters and stuff like that. And that was one of them. And that wasn't meant to be in the actual Scooby-Doo series at all. It was just kind of a one-off. They did that with sometimes they would do team ups. Like I did an Animat and Secret Squirrel one that was in that same series. Mm-hmm. And then they had like Magilla Gorilla and Quick Draw McGraw teaming up. I'm like, why? But they did it. I didn't draw that, but there's an interesting story on that Pup Named Scooby-Doo comic, which is not a great one. But I was right in the middle of drawing that, and I had a heart attack at 35, which was not good. But I didn't get to finish the second story, and I did like 3 pages of the second story, and they had to bring somebody else to fill it in and finish it off. And then after I got out of the hospital, they're throwing pages at me like, "Do these look okay? Are you all right with these?" I'm like, "Guys, I'm recovering. I don't even want to look at this now." But it was I mean, I enjoyed drawing it, and it was really nice because Bill Matheny wrote it, and he and I were really close. He was a head writer, one of the writers at the first season, and then he became like head writer when we did those last 3 episodes of last season. And he worked really close with Lane Reichert, who was the producer on the second season. And but Bill got to write that, and it was just kind of like, again, just doing the last episode of the show. So it was a lot of fun doing it. Yeah. I love drawing those characters. I mean, I was with those characters from presentation all the way through the end of production with that show. So there wasn't one thing there was one guy working on it prior to me, and he was drawing them a little more realistic. And then even when I got the 13, or when I got Pup Scooby, when I actually got put on it, I was still thinking, oh, this is going to take place in Scooby World. It's going to look like, like any of this, or Scooby, like, where are you? It's going to look like that, but the characters are going to look a little more cartoony, I guess. But then, Tom Ruegger decided, no, the whole show is going to be really cartoony. And we really didn't push it. I don't think we pushed it enough that first season. When Lane took it over, I did the pilot storyboard for the first season. And then I was in charge of character design all the way through that. And I had a crew of guys that worked for me on that. But after I did the board on the first season, we got Bill Hanna to time it, and that was kind of an interesting story. I was standing in Tom Ruegger's office, and Bill Hanna came by, and he was like, "I just saw that storyboard that you guys did for Pup Named Scooby-Doo." I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Are they going to let you do all those wild takes and all that stuff that you do?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Those are great. Keep that up." And I said, "Well, you invented that stuff." I said, we're just following, what you did." He goes, "Well, it's great. Just keep it up." And he walks out, and I looked at Tom, and I'm like, who would be great to direct that first episode? And I just, Bill Hanna. And he's like, ugh. And next thing I know, Tom's running up to his office, begging him to direct it. And it was beautiful the way he did it. It was like everything hit exactly where it was supposed to. But the timing on that thing was impeccable. The animation wasn't that great, but it didn't matter because he timed it right. So it all hit where it was supposed to. So, but then after Tom left to go over to Warner Brothers to work on Tiny Toons, and Lane Reichert came over, and Lane and I did the majority of the storyboards for that second season, and Lane and I really pushed the characters as farther than they were in the first season. You know, we had just a lot more fun up with it, and just, you know, it just had a looser feel to it. The first season was all done on that computer, and it looked all like digital, and it was really before computers were figured out, and everything had like a pixeled look to it, and it was just horrible. It was color-wise and everything was really bright. But the second season, we got to do it back on film. So when that first film came back and I looked at it, I'm like, that's the way the show should look. And I was so happy about that. And so, like I said, I boarded probably, I'd say 8 out of the 13, if that, or at least half of some episodes. And then the third season, Lane left to go into something else. I mean, he didn't leave the studio, but he got put on another project. And it was me and Bill Matheny. And they brought another guy that was a producer. They brought him in from overseas. He was some kind of overseas director, and he just didn't get the show. And ABC would like come to the meetings, and they'd just be like, this guy would be sitting there in the meeting, and I'd be behind him in a chair, and they'd be looking around him going, so Scott, what do you think that we should do with with this show, or how we're going to fix this? And the guy, I was like, well, maybe you should ask him because he's the producer. But and that happened to me on Addams Family too, because I was supposed to produce that. And it was the same thing. ABC wanted me to be the producer on Addams Family. And it was the same scenario. They brought this other guy in, and they kept looking at me, but he stayed there. I said, no, you need to talk to him. But the guy they brought in for Pup Scooby, they let him go, and I just finished off the rest of the shows and directing and producing and all that stuff while I was doing my character design job. So it was interesting. It was a long haul, but it was a lot of fun. I love that show. I love those characters. Love drawing them. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff you can do with them.
They still stand to this to time. I mean, because if you like in What's New Scooby-Doo, there was like a past reference where like they went back to Velma's birthday, and it was like the same style of a pup named Scooby-Doo.
They got Selmas Costume wrong color though.
They did that. Yes, I did see that. But it was cool to see like the same like styles of them. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. I think that was in the second or third season, because I was the supervising director on the first season. I wasn't on the second. So I think that happened in the second season. So I didn't have anything to do with that. So you can't pin that on me that her dress was the wrong color. It wouldn't have been if I'd been on it, So yeah.
For sure. Well, like I said, you've done amazing work in comic books. We all know that. We love you for that. One thing I do have to ask, and I've been on these panels in the past with Nikki and with Wendy, and I've always asked this question. They're probably going to roll their eyes when I ask this question, but out of like, don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed all the theme songs for Scooby-Doo, but man, on a pup named Scooby-Doo, there's some soulful music in that show. Like, I just want to know, do you know who those women are that have sang those songs for a pup named Scooby-Doo?
Oh, I think, I know Tom Ruger knows because he's the one that hired him. I could find out for you. I'll send that to you in a message later, but I don't know.
Okay.
Off the top of my head. I mean, I know it was just all this doo-wop groups, and I don't know, there are these people that just, that's all they did. They were like session singers, as far as I know.
I don't know why I became so obsessed with that in my life, but just like
really cool because
I just did. Like I would take a shower and I'm like, who are those beautiful black women that are singing a pup named Scooby-Doo? I don't know. Like, why am I so obsessed?
Well, to be honest, they did give Tom a lot of crap at the beginning of that, because it's like, why do you have people singing over the dialogue? That doesn't work. And he's like, well, it will. And so he finally plugged it in the way it does, and it does work really well.
It does.
It's just very undertoned, and it's supposed to sound like that. I mean, that's that's the good part about it. So yeah.
On the subject of a pup named Scooby-Doo, like I said, it's a great series. We, as collectors, we love the merchandise from a pup named Scooby-Doo. But one thing that I've always kind of wondered is, why is there not that many? Why was there never much merchandise of a pup named Scooby-Doo? Like, I know there were some puzzles. I know there was a comic book, a plush, some figures. I know there's like little miscellaneous things. Like I have a whistle behind me that's a pup named Scooby-Doo, just some other different things. But do you know why there wasn't much merchandise for that show?
I really don't. I did the artwork for the puzzles. I know that. I did the artwork for the comic book. They're just, I don't know if it wasn't like, it's not that it didn't catch on, because it kind of did.
Right.
But I think they were more concentrating on just Scooby himself as more the evergreen property, as opposed to, you know, the sub-series or whatever you want to call them, you know, the spin-offs.
I hear
So
you.
I'm pretty sure that's what happened, because I don't remember, because I was doing a lot of stuff with licensing at that point. And I don't remember why there wasn't a demand for that stuff, really. I just think they were, you know, Scooby was more well known, and that was and especially after those other DVDs took off, the first 5 or the first 4 or whatever they were, however many there were. That really showed them that that character was, you know, up there with like Mickey Mouse. Seriously, I mean, they were like, you know, they could just put him on anything, put him on a backpack, put him on a coffee mug, put him on a towel rack, you know, anything, and they could sell it. So they just finally just kind of stumbled across that, and it was like nonstop from that point on. So yeah, but again, the other characters, I think just because it just wasn't as well known, you know, because he'd been around for 40 plus years at that point, or 30 or something like that, and so that's how they did it.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Well, thank you for answering that. My last question is switching over to the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. Like I said, it's one of my top 5 shows as well. One thing I've always kind of stuck out to me a little bit is that the 13 Ghosts, and I feel like it always had that playful tone, which Scooby-Doo always had. But I also know, like, Where Are You? And the Scooby-Doo show, it was also very playful, but yet it had those dark undertones. I noticed in like you said, 13 Ghosts, when you very first started talking about it, they were real monsters, which I think was always really cool. And that's something that always kind of intrigued me about the show. Tell me, did you feel like the show was more playful, or did you kind of feel like it was more dark? I mean, did you kind of feel like it balanced out well with how it was? I mean, tell me, what did you think about that?
The original presentation for it was a very, very dark show. I think one of the first script synopsis I read was there was like a little kid laying on a bed reading a book at night, and all of a sudden all this like sparkle dust started forming around him, and they spins him around and he disappears. And it starts happening to all the children in the town. That was one of the stories, because one of the ghosts was capturing them and taking them like a Pied Piper type of thing almost. And I thought, I was like, and you know, you'd see like the book would fall down on the bed, you know, that's all that's left. And I was like, this is awesome. It's really cool. I mean, it's like a cool way to take this franchise. Has never been there before. And like I said, it's always been, you know, like, you know, somebody trying to swindle somebody else out of something, and turned out to be fake. But this wasn't. This was like the real deal. So I thought it was like, this is a really cool way to like breathe new life into the franchise, and seeing the redesign on the characters. I mean, even Shaggy at one point, I think, had like a sweater tied around his shoulders and stuff. And it was like he had like khaki shorts on and stuff. I was like, wow, that's interesting. But I just really liked the idea of it. But it was just darker. It got to, as the show progressed, I think Tom Ruegger kind of injected more of his type of humor into it. You know, like made like kind of the more silly or zany references and stuff that would, like, when, you know, like just the action would stop down and then somebody would turn the camera and say something goofy, or somebody would have a goofy name or whatever. Or I think if you notice, every episode, I think they have a big rubber duck that comes out of nowhere. I think every episode has that, I'm pretty sure. And that was something he thought was hilarious. So, but that was part of it. You know, like I said, the underlying tones, I mean, because Vincent Price was in it, that lent a whole lot of like credibility and just scariness to it. You know, that brought a whole different level that you didn't normally have in Scooby. And he had just come off his Thriller narration, and that was why, one of the main reasons why he was picked for that, because it was like, oh, Vincent Price. And he does that laugh at the end of, you know, the end of the main title, the same laugh that he did on Thriller. You know, so it was like, yeah, that's it. So, but yeah, I think that's what it was. I think there was a weird underlying zaniness to it, especially when Flim Flam would come in and act like nothing's going on and just try to bamboozle somebody out of something, you know, whether it was the villain or whatever, you know. So that was part of Tom's, I think, doing on that too. I mean, yeah, well, again, having just worked on that show, I was working freelance on that show, so I just get a script and it'd be like, oh, okay, so I've got these wacky witch characters that look like the Three Stooges, and they have to do this harem dance every scene that they're in, you know, and you have to do the same motion over and over and over, you know.
Mhm.
And, you know, you can't just cut and paste, because that's back in the days before you could just cut and paste stuff. So I had to retrace that every time and make sure it was
For
staged
sure.
exactly the same way. But, you know, just stuff like that, he interjected that, even though, you know, Mitch had the darkness to it and Tom had his, you know, his zany way of writing it that kind of gave it a different spirit, I guess, you know, for lack of a better. Yeah.
There was some episodes in the 13 Ghosts that I thought were actually, you know, like I said, you guys worked on them and that were very well, you know, it kind of sent chills down my back, even with what to this day still I watch them, because like when the music starts, it's like the art style in the back is just dark, and then it pans to, you know, Vincent Price's castle, and it's just, you know, it's that dark music. It kind of takes me back to the Where Are You? Also to some of the monsters, like I know that in the very like first episode when like that the 13th demon's like rolling down, it has a flames coming out, like, you know, it's just spooky, and like the sounds and the art style that you guys did. So I just think it was cool. I think it was kind of leading into some of the darker styles. They're like, even like when y'all guys went over to Zombie Island, and you know, I just think it was cool how y'all were building up to that.
I think Mitch wrote that organ intro. I'm pretty sure that he's the one that came up with that, because he had a keyboard in his office. So I'm pretty sure he came up with that, you know. But okay, here's the director in me. In the main title, and why is it always in the main title that I catch something that's wrong? But there's that one part where I think it's that flaming steamroller demon that they have comes up behind. I think it's like Flim Flam and Scooby or somebody running towards camera, and you see the steamroller come towards them, and you see it rolling, and all of a sudden, boom, it stops, and it's just a blur of red and yellow. And I'm like, that should still be moving until they go to the next scene. What is going on? And that just kills me, because I can't handle stuff like that, you know, especially in the main title. And, you know, like on Scooby-Doo show, we won't go there, but Shaggy doesn't have his arms, and Dub's missing his chin. And that main title too. And that bothers me as well, but that's okay. I'm living with it, you know. If it were up to me, I'd go back and retake it and just put that film back in, but I can't.
So staying on 13 Ghosts, I'm just curious why some of the title cards are like in the middle of the episode as opposed to the beginning.
They always did, yeah. That was a thing where they wanted to do like a teaser, like in the old TV shows. Like if you watched like in the '60s, like Bewitched and stuff like that, even That Girl and I Dream of Jeannie, they always had this little tag at the beginning that would kind of set up the episode, whether it had anything to do with the episode or not. Flintstones had that. This was the same way of thinking, where it's like, okay, we're gonna set this up, and you're definitely gonna come back after the commercial or after the main title, because they'd usually do that teaser, and then they would do the main title, and then they would go to a commercial, and then they come back and have the main title card or whatever sometimes. So yeah, that's all it was. It was just a to get you interested in the episode situation before they even told you what the episode was. So yeah, that's pretty much all. There's no, like you said, there's no big conspiracy theories behind all this stuff. It's just, that's the way they did it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it interesting how dark the series was supposed to be. And I also thought it was weird that it said Scrappy would rather be chasing spooks than having sex.
What?
In that PDF, it said that under Scrappy's character.
Seriously?
Like,
I don't remember seeing that. I don't remember seeing
yeah.
it. I haven't read it in a while, because I've only read it when I was back in the day, but I didn't realize that was a deal.
I thought that was really weird. Like when I read that, I was
Am I
like,
blushing? Am I blushing right now? I don't think I should be, but I probably am at this point. But yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I didn't know that was even a thing. But again, you got it. Well, those guys, the way they wrote it, they were trying to make it more not more adult, but just more like cut to the chase. Here's what it really is, you know. But I don't remember seeing that, but I'll certainly take a look at it after we get off.
now's a good time for Wendy to ask her Scrappy question.
Oh gosh.
Do I have a Scrappy question? What?
the question you always ask. Are you a Scrappy fan or not?
Oh, well, I already knew this. So yeah. Yes, Scott. Are you going to join the I Love Scrappy fan club with Cameron and I and leave Nikki as the odd person out?
I'm
Team
already
Scrappy or not?
I'm already a charter member, so you don't have to worry about that.
There we go.
Oh, look
Sorry.
at that.
That
I
was
don't know.
yeah, Cam made like hearts appear.
First, just look at
Oh, I didn't
that.
even know it did that. Okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I
I did not know
That's
that.
like voodoo. What's wrong with it? What is that?
That
All
scared
for
me.
Scrappy.
I thought Wendy was sending it up through the screen. I was like,
Wendy's love is everywhere. So, yeah.
Oh my god.
All right, so
Oh,
I'm
love for Scrappy
I'm the odd
strong.
one out. It's fine. I can handle it.
Oh, to be honest, I was very, very happy that Scrappy was included in 13 Ghosts. I loved drawing him. I still to this day love drawing Scrappy. Because I mean, there's a way to make him look a lot cuter than some of the artists draw him back in the day. Even some of the animation comes off kind of chunky, but he's a really cute character. I like drawing him a lot. Yeah.
Did you watch Return of the 13th Ghost?
I tell you what, most of the things that they put out now, and I'm sorry because I put my time in on a lot of this stuff. Most of the things that they turn out now, I get maybe 10 minutes in and I'm like, oh no, I can't do it. I'm sorry. And nothing against anybody that worked on it. I mean, good for them. You know, they've all got jobs and they're all doing what they want to do and they're living their dream. And I was there and I've done that. But it's just not it's not my Scooby, you know, it's just not. And I wish it were, but I got to do my Scooby and that's all that matters. So yeah, but that's just, yeah, I don't watch the new ones, you know. I mean, I'm interested in some of them. I still am a little miffed about the Scooby and Crypto team up, but that's a whole nother story that we'll go into at some point. But and I was kind of miffed about the Scooby and Kiss one too, to be honest, because I kind of had a lot to do with that one, but it was kind of ignored when I was pitching it. Just like there's a lot of things that I pitched that were kind of like thrown by the wayside, you know, as far as the DVDs go and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk the son of Scooby-Doo. You mentioned this on Alexa's podcast, The Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo. And I need to know more about this. What is it? How did it come to be? And why was it never made?
Okay, that's a very long story, and I'll try to make it as condensed as I possibly can. Warner Brothers came to us because the Scooby-Doo live action film had come out, and they were like, we want to do a new Scooby-Doo series. Like, okay, but we want to do a spin on it. We don't want to make it the same Scooby-Doo that was made in 1969, which right away I was like, yeah, let's do that. So he said facetiously, but so anyway, they wanted to do something that was more like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because that was hot on WB at that time. So I'm like, okay, how can we reinvent it without reinventing it and still taking that into account? So I loved 13 Ghosts like you guys did. And I thought, let's make it real monsters, because I did like that aspect of it. I just never thought it was really taken to the nth degree, like, you know, like in 13 Ghosts, like they should have. I mean, it was definitely the villain, but it was kind of like, you know, it had more, Vincent Price had more to do with getting rid of those ghosts than Scooby and Scrappy and Shaggy did, and Daphne. So anyway, what I did was I said, okay, Scooby's going to still be in the show all the time, but he's got a son, and his son is the same size as him, but he's yellow and he looks scared all the time. He's got all the hair like shooting out of him all the time, and he's always like, you know, biting his fingernails. And so it's like, you know, it's like, and I called him Scaredy Doo. Okay. So what I did is I basically took all the like relatives of the original gang. So it was Fred's brother named, I think I'd call him Garrett. We had one girl that was just random. Her name was Marilee, and she was kind of the gadgeteer. But Garrett was more like, he was more into like the paranormal. He believed it, and he knew there was something wrong. Okay. Marilee was the gadgeteer. She was like, came up with all the Ghostbuster-esque contraptions. She refitted the mystery machine to be able to, you know, have all the gadgets and stuff that it needed. And then there was Shaggy's cousins, who was Googie and Clyde and Googie. And I kind of did a Jay and Silent Bob number on them. A little more grungy looking, you know, a little more Seattle grunge at the time. And it definitely looks like the time period it was created in. And then I had Zelda Dinkley, who was Velma's niece. And she was really tuned into the paranormal. She could like, you know, like project things and, you know, like really knew when there was something around that shouldn't be. And she could like see the ghost when nobody else could. And so, you know, with those characters together, you know, they were trying to save the world from, it's like almost like Buffy on Hellmouth with the Hellmouth. They were trying to like, they knew about it, they had to stop it, but they didn't let anybody else in on it, except they did try to tell the original gang. They tried to tell Shaggy, Velma, Daphne, and Fred, and they're like, oh, it's just a guy in a mask. It's not real. What's wrong with you? We've been through this before. Velma's very like, you know, even though it's her niece, she's just like, no, those aren't real. There's no such things as ghosts and everything. So that was the thing. And then Scaredy-Doo being worse than Scooby was even funnier, I thought, because he's just like, you know, he'd lose it. And you know, Scooby's even trying to like get him back together. Like, come on, son, push him. He's kind of playing the scrappy role, like pushing him into, you know, you're braver than this, you know. So that was the whole concept. And like I said, making it like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Unfortunately, nobody went for it. They were just like, no, this isn't what we want to do. They said, we want to do Scooby with the original characters. I'm like, okay. I said, well, if you're going to do that, then let's modernize them, which I didn't want to do, but you know, it's like, okay, if this is my only alternative. So I did a piece of artwork where I have all the characters running down the stairs, and there's like, I used one of the ghosts from the original show because I'm still too true to my roots. But I did Fred with kind of a shaved head, not shaved head, but like tighter hair and a little soul patch. And I gave him a sweater with a stripe across it. And I put Daphne in like kind of a sort of a mini skirt, but purple. I had Velma in a big hoodie sweater that was just like her sweater, but it was a hoodie, which kind of fit the time. And then I went back and I basically took the outfit that I put on Googie from Son of Scooby-Doo. I put that outfit on Shaggy. So he had like shorts and big sneakers and a beanie and a big t-shirt, and they're all run down the stairs. And Scooby's exactly the same. So they're like, yeah, no, you've gone too far. Just like they said I went too far on Son of Scooby. I'm like, okay, all right. So then that's when I went to UO and started crying. I was like, I can't, UO, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, on this. I don't know what they want. I said, they don't know what they want. So we sat down and we started like just banging out different versions of the girls in costumes, and we didn't really change Shaggy that much. The only thing that survived when they got down to like doing what's new Scooby-Doo, when they finally came up with that idea, the only thing that survived from my original design was the stripe across Fred's t-shirt. That was it. That was all my input. I was like, well, at least I got that. But everybody looked exactly the same. Fred lost his scarf. Daphne lost her scarf. They wanted to make Daphne carrying this purse all the time that she could just pull anything out of it. So they did take my gadgeteer idea. The only downside is I had already done my 2 DVDs at that point. I did Vampire and I had done Monster of Mexico. And when we went into the pitch it to WB, they took all my artwork, all the backgrounds that we had done, and all the designs basically that we'd done, and they said, this is the show. And I'm like, huh? You know, that's not, huh? You know, and then I looked over and our president of animation was there, you know, because it was an important meeting, because, you know, it was one of the first shows that we did with Kids WB, I think, at that point. And he had a copy of my Son of Scooby-Doo presentation in his lap, and he was reading it. I'm like, why are you looking at that now? And I got so just kind of upset by it. And I started getting up and pacing around the room, and he came over and he goes, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. You know, but anyway, but it's sold, the show sold. They made me supervising director on it. I thought I was going to be producer, but that was not happening either, because they brought this guy who worked on The Simpsons. His name is Chuck Sheets. They brought him in, and they said because he had primetime experience, and I don't know what that had to do with anything, but great. He did his job, and I did supervising director, and I went over all the storyboards and looked at all the models and everything, and just basically got Chuck in shape to take the show over at some point, and that's what happened. So, and he took it over after the second season. And then I think that's when they gave me something else. I don't remember what. Oh, they made me a director on the second season for like one episode, and that was fine. At least I still had a job, so that was good. But yeah, but it was that was interesting the way it all panned out. But it went a whole different direction. I mean, it didn't really go a different direction than the original show. Kind of the same. It actually was a lot closer to the Scooby-Doo show than it was to Where Are You, I think, you know, as far as, I mean, other than using laptops and cell phones and stuff like that.
So you brought up Monster Mexico. Can we talk about the controversy around that movie a little?
Yeah, it's, people kind of have think there's like racial tendencies in it. I don't necessarily agree with that because we had cast-wise, everybody that did the voices in it were, you know, Latina or Latino descent, and none of them had a problem with the script. And we have Rita Moreno, for goodness sake, you know, and she loved it. She had a great time, you know, doing it. And another interesting story about that, there was a guy that I went to Cal Arts with, Jesse Borrego, who did the voice of one of the brothers. And it was so funny. I hadn't seen Jesse since Cal Arts days. And I was responsible. Jesse was on Fame. He was on the TV series Fame. But I was sitting at home one night and it came up on TV on our Channel 5. They were like, his picture came up and they're like, this guy came in for an interview or in for an audition on Fame, and they want to use him, but they don't have any of the information. And if anybody knows how to get a hold of him. And I went and jumped in my car and I drove to Cal Arts and I told him. And he's like, what? Are you out of your mind? I'm like, no, they call him, you know, and this was like 10 o'clock at night, you know, that I'm telling him this, or 11 o'clock at night. So the next day he went in there, he got the job. So I'm sitting there not knowing that this was going to happen. I'm sitting there in casting for the Monster Mexico. Jesse walks in and I'm like, I have not seen Jesse since Cal Arts days. And I was like, Jesse, I know you don't remember me. And I went up and told him that story. And he goes, you're the guy that got me my career. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I just told that story to People Magazine like 2 weeks ago, that some random guy came up to me at school and told me. So it was really neat. We'd had a really nice reunion, and just, you know, it was really nice to see him again. But yeah, I mean, you know, the whole thing about, you know, everybody's saying it's kind of racist. It's like, you know, we didn't do anything that didn't honor what, you know, what Mexico's about or anything. I mean, you know, I mean, they went across the border. When you go across the border, there's automatically like touristy stuff that you have to stop at. We had that, and it had all the tchotchkes. It's like, here's the food, here's the you know, the sombreros that you can buy, here's the guitars, here's the jewelry, you know, all that stuff. It's so funny. It's like people that are like complaining about it. It's like, have you ever been to Mexico? Have you ever seen it? Because that's what it is. It's not, we weren't being derogatory on any sense of the word. We got a lot of flack for comparing the Day of the Dead to Halloween. Well, it kind of is. It kind of has some of the same customs, you know, some of the same things in common. We did show what they do at the Day of the Dead ceremony, where they lay the mementos onto the grave sites, you know, and honor the dead for that, you know, so that's what it is. We got a lot of crap about it not being a true chupacabra, even though it was called a chupacabra. The only reason that happened is because Christopher Keenan, who was the creative executive over all those movies, wanted a Bigfoot. That's it. There's no big conspiracy theory. We weren't out not to do a chupacabra, even though everybody say, well, it's not a true chupacabra. No, it's not. I know what it looks like. You know, he just didn't want that. He wanted a Bigfoot. So that's what we did. We did a Bigfoot. You know, again, there's nothing more behind it than that. But yeah, I've never really agreed with some of the comments that have been made about it, because I don't get it. I don't see what they're really saying. I mean, you know, again, you know, and Wendy and I were talking about this at one point too. It's like, if you went and did an episode in Canada, what would you have? You know, what would be the things that you would see when you go to Canada? You'd have a mountain, you'd have lumberjacks, you'd have a beaver, you'd have whatever, you know, it's just no different. You know,
everyone would be saying A.
Everybody would be saying
for no
A.
reason.
And wearing
or a boot, which is not even actually a real thing, except in like
The
one
maple
small
syrup.
place in Canada.
Maple
And no
syrup,
one
and
would bat an eye. No one would care. They'd be like,
maybe,
that's great.
maybe
That's the way
wearing
they are.
plaid shirts and stocking caps, you know? That's what they do.
Absolutely.
And the same thing, Cameron. Anybody goes to Texas? What do you see in Texas? You know?
Armadillos.
Armadillo and steers.
Yes.
Steers?
Yes, and guns and cows and cowboy hats and stars. You're good. You're never gonna offend me, I promise.
I'm not offending anybody. Sorry. But no, it's a big deal, you know. So it's like wherever we went, you had to show this is the area that you're in. You know, it's no different than like the ones that were done later. It's like they went to when we did that last one, when I co-directed it with Joe Sitka, the Loch Ness one. You know, you had the Highland Games going on. Really? You know, at the exact same time the gang's there? Okay, well, that's known to be in Scotland, so that's what you do. So is that racist? You know?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I was excited for Monster in Mexico because my husband and I had our honeymoon in Mexico. We climbed the top of Chichen Itza, and it was in the movie, and that was like so cool.
That was when they still let you climb to the top.
Yeah.
So there you go. So that's I don't get it. You know, people can say whatever they want about stuff. I don't know. I'm just trying to, you know, do what I love, and you know, it's sad that people, you know, have to, you know, be derogatory. So
yeah,
try to find something wrong with something that's so innocent, you know.
Yeah.
It's sad how people today like go back, and I think Wendy and Nikki and I have talked about this in past panels, like they'll go back and they'll just nitpick on the old Scooby-Doo or things that you guys have done where, you know, you guys didn't, you know, y'all were never doing anything like that. You were honoring it, you know what I mean? Y'all are being true to Scooby-Doo, and I just don't understand why people today have to go back and nitpick people on all of it, you know? So
you know, it also goes back to the beginning of time. I mean, everything was a different time period, and things were accepted in that time period, and that's what that's what you kind of have to accept. You know, it's history, and it's whether it's bad or good, or it doesn't hold up in today's culture. You know, sorry, you know, we didn't have anything to do with it, but we're feeling the effects of people that are offended by it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But even with that, though, I mean, maybe some things, but I think that is a huge cop-out because people need an excuse to be offended.
Absolutely.
Because okay, maybe there are some things that are like a product of their time, but if someone draws my face and they give me a big nose, should I be offended by it? No, because that's what my face looks like. If you give me brown hair instead of blonde hair, do I have a right to be offended by that? No, I have brown hair. So if you draw someone to look like their ethnicity, that's not a product of the time. That's reality. Now, unless you are making a product that is making fun of somebody or overtly being derogatory to them because of what they look like, that's different. But all through Scooby-Doo, anytime that you have someone of ethnic descent depicted, what is there to be offended about? Because this is what we look like. This is what, should I be offended if you make me white? No, I'm a Caucasian. Period. Unless you're telling me that I'm worthless because I'm white, that would be different. But if all you're doing is making a character who is white or whatever color or whatever ethnicity, you like to tease me about my accent. I'm like, what accent? I don't have an accent. But I kind of do because other people can hear it. Is that offensive to me? Well, no, if that's what I sound like and that's how someone imitates me, that's just reality, guys. It's just reality. We need to stop being offended by things that are not offensive. And this idea that, oh, well, I have a right to be offended by whatever I want. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because if that's the case, I'm offended that you're offended by things that are not offensive. So there you go. So which one of us is right and which one has more of a right to be offended here? Like, let's just stop. You know, let's just live our lives. Stop looking for things that are negative because you will always find something negative if you look hard enough, but you are manufacturing that yourself. There is nothing wrong with that film that you made. It's wonderful. you showed me one time like a little teaser or behind the scenes video where they were talking about Monster of Mexico and the making of it. And even in the video, it's talking about how you were very culturally sensitive to what you were doing. You didn't just slap this out, you know, and all through Scooby, if you go back to Where Are You? They did research. They had people come in. Is this okay? What should we do? To stand back and be like, oh, I don't like this because I have this weird perception that I've created out of my own imagination because whatever.
Mm.
Why? What is the point in that?
I don't know. And
shouldn't be a thing.
I mean, it usually comes from the people who didn't have anything to do with it. You know, they just have to kind of analyze it and feel, you know, give their 2 cents.
Yeah.
Makes them feel better, I guess. I don't know.
I guess.
Yeah. Nope.
Let's go back to September 13th, 1969. You were, what, 9 years old?
Years old. Yeah, I
And
just
you
turned.
were watching the very first episode of Scooby-Doo airing on
Yep.
television.
Yep.
What was that like for you?
Well, it started out a little bit before that. There was my mom was reading the TV guide one night, and they used to have these little yellow pages in the back of the TV guide that was like a teletype of like current stuff that's happening. Like, here's hot off the press, and we didn't have time to put it into an article, but we're going to put it on the back of the TV guide. So she's reading that. She goes, "Oh, Scotty, you know, you need to listen to this." And I was like, "What?" And she says, "CBS is developing 3 shows with Hanna-Barbera, and one of them is called Dastardly Motley and Her Flying Machines, and the other one is called The Peril of the Penelope Pit Stop, and then there's a third one called Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I know what the first 2 are, you know, because they were on Wacky Races, so they got their own shows. That's really cool. But what's a Scooby-Doo thing?" And that just, you know, I was like, "What is that?" I was so intrigued by it. So flash forward a few months later, and in the mornings after my dad and I would drop my mom off to work. He would go get coffee, but sometimes we'd swing by this little bookstore called the Newsstand, and they had comic books. And I was able to go in and pick one comic book out because they were 12 cents. And my gosh, you know, when I was a kid, they were a dime, my dad used to say. I'm like, okay, so when they went up to 12 cents and then when they went up to 15, they lost their minds. So anyway, both of my parents did. So I would have to stand, they had this big, I mean, you know, I was only like, you know, 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. They had this huge wall of comic books just stacked to the ceiling, you know, like just they were overlapping, you could see. And I'd have to, my dad sometimes wouldn't even come in with me because he's like, "You're going to take too long. I don't want to go in." So he would sit out in the car in front of the store, and I would go through and I would like look at the comic and I'd page through it really quick. Like, do I want this one? Nope. Do I want this one? Nope. So, and he'd be honking the horn, like, "Come on, you know, what's taking you so long?" So right before these shows premiered, I was thumbing through this comic book really quick, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my goodness." I stopped and I saw an ad for the cartoons that were coming on CBS that season in 1969. And here it is. You can see it. So it shows all those shows. It shows Dastardly Motley and Penelope at Stop, and my first look at what Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And I couldn't believe it. I was like, "What is this?" And it just says, you know, about, you know, the teenagers and a dog, you know, solving mysteries. I'm like, "What is this thing?" So I was hooked at that point. Then usually, but that was like September 13th. On the 14th, like the Friday night beforehand, they would show a preview show every year. So they would take like a current sitcom that had kids in it, and they would usually introduce what those new cartoons were. I think that year it was Family Affair with Buffy, Jody, and Sissy, and they were all talking about Uncle Bill and Mr. French, what the new cartoons were going to be on CBS tomorrow. That was the first time I saw Scooby, and I was like, I had never seen a Hanna-Barbera show that looked like that, except the only one that comes close was the Huck Finn show, where it was that live action cartoon hybrid that they did in 1968, stylistically, because Ewo designed everything on that as well. But I had never seen it like just in a cartoon by itself with the characters looking the way they did and looking like semi-realistic, but caricatured. And I was so like just blown away by it. And so I couldn't wait for the next day. Because it was, and what was even worse that season, because on ABC they had Chattanooga Cats and I think Hardy Boys, Gulliver, I don't remember, Smokey Bear Show. I think there was a few others. And then NBC had the Banana Splits that year. And my uncle was getting married that weekend. Everything was going to premiere. The good thing was ABC and NBC premiered the week before, and that was the weekend his wedding was. So I didn't miss the Scooby-Doo premiere. So that was like, you know, the next weekend, and we were back home, and I was like, thank goodness. So I got to see that, got up, and that was the other thing too. Okay, this is a little bit probably more information you need. When they were previewing the shows, like at the end of like on Saturday morning, at the end of each show, they'd say coming this fall, and they would show like a clip of what the new shows were going to be. So CBS, ABC, and NBC were all premiering like right at the end of the show. They would do that. So I would go up to the dial on the TV, and I'm whipping it back and forth like crazy, trying to catch all those previews. Well, it woke my parents up, and my mom comes out just, what are you doing? You're going to break the dial off the TV. What are you doing with that? You can't do that anymore. You're just going to break it. So just stop it. And okay, so next Saturday, you can't change the channel. You leave it on one channel all the time because you're just going to ruin our television. And I was like, okay. So that next Saturday was okay because I just wanted to see CBS, you know. So I put it on. I got to see Dashley, Motley, and Penelope Pit Stop. And then it was, I think Archie was on at some point, but after Scooby. So I didn't change the channel until after I got kind of like tired. And then I just kind of like went up and gently changed it to another channel. So they didn't hear it, but it was okay. But no, that's how, and then like I said, when I first saw Scooby, it was the first episode, What a Night for a Night. It was just like nothing I'd ever seen before, you know, and I just loved it, loved every second of it. And I was hooked. And to be honest, I know you guys are probably kind of, but I really like the second season. In fact, I'll find myself watching the second season over the first season because of the songs, the musical romps. And I was so happy to be able to put those in my films too, those musical romps, because that was like, you know, you're just doing, you know, like 2 minutes of like just nothing but sight gags. And I just thought that was really fun. But I love those songs and those, it was just so bubblegum and poppy sound of music. And that was the thing too, is like Fred Silverman was so adamant about, he thought that that's what kids were into because he had this thing about the Beatles cartoon was just kicking everybody's butt on Saturday morning because it was the Beatles. It's not because it was songs, it was the Beatles. And he couldn't figure out why it was so popular. So he's like, I've got to figure out a way to make that on our network. So he did this show called The Beagles, which were these two dogs that they sing songs. And it was the guys, but it's done by the same people that did Underdog. And he had that, and that didn't get the ratings either. So then he stumbled across the Archies. And then when he made the Archies have their singing stuff, it was like the second season when they did Sugar Sugar was like the top song of 1969 that year. And then he incorporated those, you know, that song stuff into Scooby because of that too, because it worked so well too. He did it on Josie and the Pussycats that same season. So the second season of Scooby having songs, and then Josie and the Pussycats having those songs with the musical romps where they're running back and forth. That was Fred Silverman's genius, you know, of like, well, this is the way to get the kids to watch, you know, because it's all, you know, pop music, and that's what he thought they loved. So, and he was right. I mean, it worked really well. So yeah, but no, I love that show. It was like I said, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before, and I was so excited to finally see it. And yeah. So.
I know the three of us wish that we could go back and have experienced watching the show.
Yeah.
The day that it aired.
Yep, it was neat.
Yeah.
And I don't even think I ate any, like, well, maybe I ate some Captain Crunch while I was watching it. Probably did. That was usually the ritual. And you just keep going back and get more bowls of it.
Yeah. Wendy, any questions?
I'm just excited to see what you've maybe brought to show us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that first thing was like the ad I just held up. That was my first introduction to Scooby. When I was a kid, there wasn't a whole lot of merchandise, just because of the way things were run back then. The only thing that there were like comic books and coloring books and maybe a board game here and there. But I remember this was like maybe I don't know, 5 or 6 months after the cartoon show came out, but this was the first thing that I remember getting was
Oh,
the comic book,
beautiful.
the first issue. And it's really kind of dog-eared because I just poured through it like I do. You know? So, and then that one, and then this is the Spooky Space Kook one, and this is my favorite cover. I love that cover. So, I don't know. But that's some of the only stuff they had. Now, the other thing was this kind of like in reference to, you guys saw the Scooby Ultimate Fan thing, right? From
Yes.
the DVD? Okay. So it was me and Scott Ennis and this guy from Missouri. I don't even remember his name. But anyway, they asked me what the item was that I was really looking for and I didn't have. And I misspoke and I said, oh, I want a give a show projector with Scooby-Doo because I had it when I was 10 years old. So the guys who were editing the thing, the guy who was directing it, in the fan favorite thing, cuts directly to Scott Ennis holding up the give a show projector with Scooby and running his finger across it like he's got it and I don't. Okay. And that's how easy it was to have. But I misspoke. It was not the give a show projector. It was the Easy Show projector, which was the first year that they put these films out and you put them you thread them through this projector, which is not an easy thing to do when you're 9 years old. But you thread them through this projector because it usually, like, you get it wrong and it'll just eat up the film and you're like, I can't watch it again. But it was the first year they did them in color. And the movies in it were Wacky Races, Autocat and Motor Mouse, and Scooby. Okay, so this is that.
I love the artwork on the box. And Scooby, poor Scooby's nose is red.
Red, and Fred's shirt is pink, and they're
Green.
all over the place, But it's really cool because it's still pretty much intact. I did get this off eBay a few years ago, so I can't say this is my original, but it's the same color because they made a blue one and a red one, and that's
Scott, that's so cool.
That's the one I had.
That is really cool.
Yeah,
that's nice.
But the story behind this, there's always a story behind everything. my director persona kicked on because the Scooby film in this is Hassle in the Castle. And there's the one where Scooby gets caught up in the trap that Fred made. And he's going all over the Rube Goldberg type thing. And there's one point where I think it's a bowling ball drops down onto a teeter board. And when it drops down, there's a flash to show the impact. The flash comes out and sticks there. They didn't pop it off. It just stays there. And I'm watching that film and I watch it back and forth a million times. I'm like, it's not going away. What's the problem? Then when I go back and I watch the episode, it's like, they made a mistake in that too. What the? And again, I picked up that stuff when I was 9 years old, 9 or 10 years old. So that was the first time I actually called a retake, I guess, because it was like, that was not supposed to be that way. But the fact that I had it on that film and I could run it back and forth and watch it a million times, and point it out to people, look at this, Mom, look. She didn't care, but it was there, The other thing that I had was when I went to Kings Island in Cincinnati, they had stores that they would sell figures and just merchandise like pennants and things like that. But they had and I think you've shown this on your panel before. But they had this Scooby, and I think that's like one of the best scopes I've ever seen of that character. I mean, it looks almost like the model sheet. It's pretty darn close. But you can see him. This was 1980, so this was like the first thing I remember seeing as like legitimate merchandise that really worked for me. So I was like, I picked that up right away. But those are my biggies. Those are my things that I really, really like and really have gravitated towards. So,
can you tell us about the pieces that are hanging up behind you?
The other thing, yeah, not to ignore this. Ewo got this for me, and this is a lithograph that's based on the piece that sold, the presentation piece that sold the series, basically. And he and Bill and Joe signed it. And Ewo, he said, would you be interested in one of these? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And next thing I know, it's on my desk. And I'm like, where'd you get that? He made some deal with a guy from somewhere, and that he knew that he'd done a lot of artwork for or something. And he got that for me. So that is that's my holy grail that I wasn't even know I needed. I didn't even know I needed, but he thought I did. So that's a lot of history behind that. The other thing is the That's from the recording session. All the cast signed that for me.
Oh, that's cool.
They're like, like Frank said, Frank said something about we solved another mystery, and then Nicole wrote, "You're cute." I'm like, what is that? I don't know. Casey wrote, "You're number one," and Heather's like, and Heather was like, when I brought her back for the set, well, you dragged me back in for another one. I'm like, yeah, I did. So got one more mystery to solve, so. But it was really nice hanging out with those guys, and then, just hearing their stories. And, Casey had, his story about how he came up with the voice of Shaggy. He came in for the audition, and he was going to audition for Freddie. And Frank wanted to audition for Shaggy, but they turned him around. And I guess it took Casey 2 or 3 times to go in before they actually decided on him. But the way he got the voice, there was a show back in a radio show, maybe in the 40s, called Our Miss Brooks with Eve Arden. And Richard Crenna did this character that was a teenager in one of the kids that she taught in the class. And he had this high-pitched voice that was sort of like what Casey had done. But he did that voice, but he made it breathy. So he said that's how he came up with it. And then when he tells you that story, he just kind of dovetails into doing Shaggy's voice, and you're like, stop it. You're just doing that in front of me. So, and then the good thing is Frank and Casey did my answering machine. At the end of one of our sessions, at the end of Monster Mexico, I wrote this like paragraph of dialogue for them both to do. And Casey's like, no, this is too long. Nobody's going to sit through this. He said, we're going to edit this. I'm like, well, yeah, but I thought maybe just do a little short. No. You just need it really short and concise. And, and I was like, okay. So we scratched out a bunch of lines, and he and Frank did it. And then I took it and I edited, I put music behind it and everything. And so it was on my answering machine for a long time. I haven't put it on my new phone yet, but it's something to cherish too, because I was really lucky that they would do it. And then, the upside is I got to draw Casey's publicity. He gave me one of his publicity shots, and I cut all the characters that he voiced around him. And I had some friends out at the time, and I stopped by to get those publicity shots. I'm like, because we were in the area, and I'm like, hey, let's go hang on a second. I called Casey, and I said, I need to get those publicity shots from you. And I'm right down the street. And he's like, well, come up. I'll open the gate. And I go in, and I told my friends, I said, you stay in the car. You don't talk to him. You don't, because I said, he's just a guy. He doesn't need to be bothered. He's a celebrity. And so they were like, oh, okay. So I get out of the car, and I stand up on Casey's landing, and I'm talking to him. He's handing me the pictures, and he's like, I told him, I said, he's like, well, who's those people in the car? I said, those are my friends. I'm showing them around LA. He goes, well, do they want to say hi? I'm like, okay. So they all got out of the car, and he told them the whole story of how he came up with a Shaggy voice, and he slips into it, and they just lost their minds, so it was really cool. So that was kind of a neat little tribute, like nice little thing for them to have happen while they were here. So I did that with Gary Owens too. I went and showed up at the place where Gary Owens was having breakfast, and I introduced him to everybody. So that was fun. That was a nice weekend. I don't even remember what your question was. Was that just it? Just showing the stuff that I came up with, or that I've collected over the years? There you go.
I do have a question for you. Your cardboard cutout in the back. I have a card. It's not behind me. I've moved it, but I have a cardboard cutout where Scooby's kind of standing like this, and he has his paw. But that one right behind you, I love it. But I've seen that cardboard cutout like in interviews, like where the original cast was like talking about. Is that the cardboard behind you?
No,
videos? No.
Yeah, it is. But I've got my own. I mean, I bought it legitimately. I didn't
cool.
There was another one that was in the one of the recording studios we used to use all the time when I was at Warner Brothers. They had one of Shaggy and Scooby that was that big together. Yes. Yeah, they had that one. That's awesome. Now the other thing you can't see, I'll tilt it up a little bit, but I'll put it back. I've got the Pup Scooby gang up there too. So you can't really.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And I don't know why I did not have the cast sign it, because every pan cell like that I have with the cast on, I usually have them sign it, because I've got the Addams Family, I've got Fender Bender 500, I've got Yo Yogi, I've got a lot of them that I did. And
that's awesome.
For some reason, I just didn't bring it in and have them do it. I had every opportunity to do that, and I just never thought about it. So oh well.
Scott, I do have a question for you, and this is something that just popped up in my head. I think us three have talked about it before, but there was a show there I think they were going to do called Hanna-Barbera Babies. Did you
Yeah.
ever know anything about that? Okay.
A
Can you
little-
shed a little bit of light on that if you don't mind?
If I had the artwork, I'd show it to you. Yeah, I mean, you can find it online. You can see it everywhere. It started out, even when I did those, it was one of those things where it's like we had a list of characters and he gave it to me and said, go do them. And he really, to be honest, he didn't really change them that much. I mean, from what the poses that I came up with, he just kind of embellished them a little bit, which was one of the times where I was like, really? You must not have a lot of time to do something or whatever. I don't know what was wrong. But it started out as a licensing thing because I think Disney and Warner Brothers both had come out with their versions of the Looney Tunes characters as babies and all the Mickey Mouse Disney characters as babies. And we weren't going to be left out in the cold. So that's why we did it. You know, we just, it was going to be a licensing thing. And everybody kind of mistakes it. Like when they see it, they think it was going to be a show. It wasn't. It was just going to be for licensing. That's all it was. The only thing, and I did this fantasy comic book cover with the Flintstone kids and the Jetsons, Junior Jetsons. And we were going to do that as a show. It came that close to being sold. And some reason, I don't remember why. I think they decided to take something else at the time, but if the Flintstone kids had gone another season, we would have done the Junior Jetsons with them. So that didn't happen.
That would have been cool.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think if there was any other things like that. But I know Bob Singer did a sell with with the baby characters that they sold in the Warner Brothers stores for a bit. Yeah.
So you drew those baby ones, the picture that we see online. Though I'm telling you, you knocked it out of the park because and I'm a 25-year-old man, but I will say those are like so freaking cute. Like when I'm looking at them, I'm like, oh, like if I was to ever have a kid one day, I'd love to put that in the nursery. Like to me, like you captured all of them, and I just thought it was cool, like seeing all of them in such a like fun, but yet still true to their character way.
The weird thing about it is that I think the only one that Ewo changed on me, he had like Yogi and Boo Boo, and Boo Boo's like poking Yogi in the eye. And I'm like, what was that? I mean, he actually changed that to make it that way. I'm like, okay. But I mean, the other thing too is those evolved into probably my lowest moment at Hanna-Barbera was a show called Yo Yogi, where they were all like preteen versions of those characters. We started out doing this thing called Yogi's Cub House, where we took all the Hanna-Barbera characters and made them like just kid versions of them. It's like Little Rascals sort of. And they had a big tree house and they put on a show. Well, one of the premises they put on a show, one of them they were just having adventures. But we got really close to doing it. And then all of a sudden it kind of evolved into, well, let's make these characters look more modern. And by modern, I mean putting like jams and Reeboks on them, because that was the buzzword at the time. If you put those on them, then that sells it right there. So we did that, and then I gave Yogi like a pink hat and a pink tie, and I still had that kid version of Yogi's head, and we took it to the network executive. This was the last year NBC did cartoons on any level, because they did the Today Show that season, the next season after that. But they were some of the most, I don't know, they were just so like harsh about doing cartoons. They just didn't, it's like the stuff that they were picking to do. And then when I came in with that, they're like, why did you give Yogi a pink hat and a pink tie? You know, does that say something about how he is? And I was like, really? You know? And then I started, you could see I was getting kind of tensed up, and I was starting to raise up on my chair, and my executive, like presentation executive, or the guy that development executive, he kind of put his hand on my shoulder so I should settle down. And he goes, well, you have to understand Scott's kind of the keeper of the classic characters at the studio. And he's like, you know, he really wants these to be handled the right way, trying to justify what, you know, you could tell I was getting kind of worked up. And she's like, well, did you think you're Yogi Bear? I'm like, and I was about ready to throw my chair at her. But at that point, I just kind of calmed down. So, but I was just like, you know, and then what that show turned into. And then, so they didn't like the boyish or the young version of Yogi that I'd done. So I basically cut Yogi's head off and put it on that character's body. And it looks terrible. I don't like anything about it. I don't like anything about that show. It's just like, it was just like, let's put, Snagglepuss having flip up glasses, and he's wearing a Letterman's jacket. He's got, I don't know if he had pants on. He probably did. Yogi, I don't think Yogi did. Boo Boo did, but Boo Boo had a backwards hat on. Cindy had a little hat with a daisy on it, and just had like her thing was off her shoulder, her blouse and everything. It just looked like a bad episode of Saved by the Bell with Yogi Bear characters. And I was so disappointed in it. And then the fact that we were sitting in one of the development executives came up with the title. Why don't we call it Yo Yogi? Like hip hop rap stuff. And I'm like, okay, why? And I was just, at that point, I was so done with it. It was just not, it was probably my lowest moment, just having to do that to those characters. I was never behind it. And I'm terribly ashamed that I even worked on it, to be honest. It wasn't my thing. And from what it went to what it finally ended up being on air, the whole different thing. So, yeah. Anyway, that's showbiz,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way it works.
So I have another question about voice actors. You brought Mindy Cohn in as Velma?
Well, according to me, yeah, I did. Christopher Keenan, who was our development or creative producer on all of our DVDs and What's New, and a lot of other stuff, all my DVDs and my Tom and Jerry DVD that I did. His version of the story is that he came into a meeting and said, "Oh, we need a voice like Natalie from Facts of Life." And I was like, "Wait a minute, let's get Mindy Cohn." And then he goes on to say, and he said, "I don't know who it was, but he said, I think Scott Jeralds was at a dry cleaners and ran into her and asked her if she would mind doing voices." That never happened. I was never at a dry cleaner, number one. And I never ran into Mindy Cohn outside of her coming in the first day to record. So what my side of the story is, Christopher, if you're watching, is that I was working one night and there was a Facts of Life reunion movie on. And I don't watch television. I listen to it for the most part because I'm usually working. And so, I heard her voice and I was like, what? Wait a minute. She could be perfect. And she's got that demographic of like all the girls that grew up watching Facts of Life, they have children now. So this makes perfect sense to have her be Velma on Scooby-Doo. So I went to work the next day and I was like, Mindy Cohn would be the perfect one. And they're like, "Oh, that's a great idea. We'll bring her in." Now, when they brought her in, she did not have the job. They just brought her in and we're going to try her out in the recording, the actual recording, with the Kids WB executives there. And when they saw her, they're like, "Oh, wasn't she on Facts of Life?" And, most of these people that were in that recording session didn't grow up on cartoons, but that made them qualified to decide what my children watched. So by the end of the recording, they had her. They decided it was her, and she had them, and they really liked her. They really liked her. So she went on to be Velma for 13 years or something like that. I don't know, quite a while. But and she was even nominated for an Emmy. I don't know if she won or not, but I remember. I do remember. Yeah, I do remember seeing her at the Emmy because I was nominated for. I don't remember, something at Warner Brothers that I worked on. I don't remember what it was, but I remember seeing her at the ceremony, and I went up and I said, "Hey," and I was like, I don't know if she remembered me. I said, "Well, you're welcome for helping you get nominated for that Emmy." And she's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." So it was like, okay. So anyway, but yeah.
So let's talk about some of the projects that you had worked on.
Some of the DVD ideas that Ewo and I came up with that were passed over. If you look at Ewo and I were really kind of hung up on two different things. We wanted an urban setting like New York or something like that. And we wanted to be a gritty New York thing. So the first one we came up with was called Scooby-Doo's First Clue. And it was a mystery that the gang never solved that had to do with a pterodactyl ghost And that's why I have the pup version and then the grown-up version. So it's like for all the flashbacks that we were going to do, we were going to use the pup characters to kind of show that that's just the way they remembered it. It wasn't necessarily what they looked like, but that's the way they remembered it. So we were gonna, that was my thing. I was gonna combine those. I was trying to get Bill Matheny, he was gonna write it. I kind of used that pterodactyl ghost from, I think it was from the Scooby-Doo show, right? Wasn't it on there? One of those episodes. I like that design a lot, but the thought of that character flying through the buildings in New York City and them chasing him and everything, or him chasing them and everything, I thought that'd be really cool. But Christopher Keenan, who was our creative executive, he wanted a werewolf, like in the subways. So I'm like, okay. So I did another version of this very same thing. I didn't show it to you, but it's the very same thing, except it's got a werewolf in the back of it. So that was that one. They passed on that one. Okay. So the next one we did was the Headless Horse. It was a takeoff on the Headless Horseman. And again, we wanted to do that urban setting. So we did Scooby-Doo and the Legend of the Haunted Hood. Ewo even wrote the premise for this one, and he was that into it. And it was basically a takeoff on the Headless Horseman, you know, and going across the bridge. And I was really kind of pushing to have Fred be, instead of Shaggy, have Fred be the male lead that was Bo Brummel was, or Bo Brahms or whatever his name was. I don't remember in the original story. But he was the one that was jealous of Freddie. You know, it was like that type of character. So Freddie was the one that the girl was in love with, you know, instead of it being Shaggy, even though Shaggy was the obvious because he looks more like Ichabod Crane. But I thought it would be kind of cool to kind of twist it that way. Or maybe she was going to be in love with both of them. I don't know. You know, so it was going to be like, you know, double trouble. So, you know, we used, again, a very urban setting. We wanted it to be, you know, going across a bridge, you know, like in Brooklyn or something like that. And we were going to use a headless motorcycle guy instead of a guy on a horse. And it never came to fruition either because nobody liked it. And that's not what they were looking for. So then I was still hung up on the whole being their first mystery type of thing or going back in time and trying to figure out a mystery. So then Ewo said, I've got the perfect thing. He'd done a piece of artwork years before that where it was going to be Scooby in prehistoric times. It was going to be a series. It was a pitch for a series. So he showed me that and I'm like, oh, that would be great. And we could do the pterodactyl in that one too. You know, so I went ahead and finished that piece of artwork off because I loved it. And I went over it a little bit, but I just thought it was cool because they're all trapped in, you know, they went back in time somehow and tried to solve the mystery before, you know, because something went really, I don't even remember what our idea was, but something went really bad. And they had to go back and stop it. So they had to go back in time and make it to where it didn't happen. So that's why we did Scooby-Doo and the 1 Million Years BC mystery. And it was after that one. Then the one that I still to this day, I think I'm even going to try to talk, if I ever do one more comic book for Warner or for DC, I think I'm going to try to talk them into let me do this, but I don't know that they will because I don't know that I could write it because it's pretty complicated. But it's Scooby-Doo and his 35th anniversary mega mystery. And I wanted it to be where Scooby and the gang go all over the country and they meet every other mystery character and they all solve the same mystery. So they get clues every time they go around the country and they run into Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels, Goober and the Ghost Chasers, Flunky Phantom, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids, Goober and the Ghost Chasers, the Chan Clan, Inch High Private Eye. I don't know why I put Speed Buggy in there because he doesn't really qualify because that's a whole different kind of show. Clue Club guys, Dino Mutt and Blue Falcon, they're all in there. Scrappy and Scooby Dumb. I was probably going to put the whole Scooby relatives in there, but I just used them as the linchpin for that. And I'll qualify my Speed Buggy comment because those are two different shows. Everybody always tries to lump in Josie and the Pussycats and Speed Buggy and those type of shows as a mystery solving show. And Josie and the Pussycats, those aren't mystery solving shows. Those are characters that run into a supervillain and then thwart the supervillain's plans. It's not solving a mystery. Funky Phantom even kind of went back and forth sometimes on that a little bit. But But I always, whenever somebody says lumps Josie and the Pussycats in with Scooby, I'm like, no, just because they were on Scooby-Doo movies, I understand that. But Speed Buggy was not, and Jabberjaw's not that way either. Jabberjaw's the same way, only it takes place in the future. Jabberjaw, there's a supervillain, and they defeat him. You know, so it's Jabberjaw, Josie and the Pussycats, Speed Buggy, and all those are all the same kind of show. Even though Dynomutt is basically them, you know, going after a supervillain too, but because they did cross them over quite a bit, I'm letting that one slide. So that's why I put him in there. But anyway, I pitched this to Warner Brothers. I was so sure that they were going to go with this. I mean, this was like my dream project that I wanted to do. And when you asked me what something I never got to work on that I always wanted to work on, this is it. So I pitched that to them, and their only comment, other than they didn't want to do it, was, yeah, I don't think anybody really knows who those other characters are. And I was like, really? I said, well, this is a good time to reintroduce them then, isn't it? No, just don't want to spend that time. And I mean, seriously, basically all the voice people were still around, and I could have I mean, even Mickey Dolenz did 2 of the characters out of all of them. You know, I could have gotten him easily. But yeah, it was so disappointing. And then, you know, after, you know, I pitched all these different ideas, and then they decided to go with Joe's Loch Ness Monster one. And then they decided to let Joe be the primary director on it. And I was like associate director or just assistant director on it. And at that point I was just like, okay, you know, again, that's showbiz. It's the way it works. But you know, I worked on that. I worked on the parts I wanted to, and made that happen for Joe. And it was, you know, it was a good run for Joe, because he got like 4 or 5 movies after that, I think. So, and Joe was somebody that I helped, you know, that I kind of like helped him in his career too, you know, just work his way up, you know, from storyboard artist to director to producer. I mean, that's, you know, that's exactly what happened to me. So it was good to pay it forward, you know, with him. So, but yeah, this one I was really, like I said, Wendy, you asked me like what was something I didn't get to work on. It was this, and that was the main thing. That you know, that's the one I missed out on. So, and that was kind of like, you know, again, that was pre fantasy comic book cover team up stuff. This was my original idea for that. So, but I would like to try maybe at some point pitching this idea to do as a comic book, and just see if DC would be interested in doing it as a comic.
That would be really cool.
It's a little complicated, but I think it'd be fun to do, because like maybe every other page could be them meeting somebody and kind of piecing things together in a mystery, because it's only 20 pages. So how are you going to get all those characters in 20 pages?
Right.
Be a little tricky, but I would kind of like to do that at some point, just to kind of, you know, finish it off and get to do it the way I kind of wanted to. But I did do a trailer for this too, that shows off what it could have been, and I just used a bunch of clips from the original shows and just cut them together. But and I think you have that, don't you?
I do.
Trailer. Should we take a look at it?
The mystery is too big for one dude. This time, he needs help. Dynomutt. Butch Cassidy. Scrappy New. The Chan Clan.
When the spooky goons are coming for you. If they catch you, then you know you're through.
T-Buggy.
'Cause you're out of time.
Inch High, Private Eye.
I'm so scared that I can't even scream.
Boo Club. Goober and the Ghost Chasers. The Funky Panel. Captain Caveman. The gangs are all here. Scooby-Doo's 35th anniversary mega mystery. Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
So there you go. How could you pass that up? Seriously.
Yeah,
Why-
right? I think that would make an amazing comic, if nothing else. If that's all that they're gonna let you do, it would be so much fun to have all those characters together.
Yep, that's what I always wanted to do with it, but oh well. But yeah, I may try some point because I know they were looking for story premises when they picked up the Batman Scooby-Doo mysteries again for another run, for an indefinite run actually, and so they were looking for story premises, so I might submit that. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all that we had planned. So now I think it's story time. If you have some fun stories for us, it'd be great to hear them.
Yeah, at Hanna-Barbera we had this thing called the Vile File that should never see the light of day because it was pretty vulgar for the most part. I mean, everybody just kind of like doing really, really vulgar cartoons of each other. And everybody drew really well, so you knew who they were caricaturing and stuff like that. So we did do that a lot. As far as stuff that, like things I've worked on that I'm really, really proud of. I mean, Freakazoid I was very proud of that because I won an Emmy for it. That was a real stretch for me. As far as doing that type of show, it was like comedy adventure, but it was more adventure than it was comedy. So everything had to be really straight. And it was like probably my first kind of voyage into like a superhero type show. I did work on Superman. I did work on Superman after that, just briefly. I did the pilot episode where the part where he's in Smallville. That was my part because the parts before that were on Krypton, and then after that there was a part where like the first scene was like a plane falling out of the sky, and Superman had to catch it and not make it fall on Metropolis. And I saw the Smallville stuff, and I'm like, well, that's kind of where I grew up, so I know I can carry that off, and everybody in my crew can probably carry that off, but I can't do the other two. So I took the Smallville stuff and had a good time with that. I think probably I did a lot of stuff the stuff at Hanna-Barbera that I did. I think Pup Scooby was probably I was the most proud of. I did a special called the Town Santa Forgot, which was really a big thing for me. I love that. That was a situation where David Kirshner had just taken over as CEO, and I was moved up to being in charge of everything, presentation for all the shows. So that year it was like Tom and Jerry Kids, Don Coyote, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, Dark Water, Fish Police, what else? I don't remember. But I had to do all the presentations for all those shows. And that was like that on top of designing everything. So he came to us with this project. It was this woman from the Midwest somewhere. I don't remember, maybe Indiana or somewhere. And she had written this poem about this kid named Jeremy Creek and how it was like he had more toys than anybody. And he was selfish and he didn't know the true meaning of Christmas. He didn't know how to share anything with anybody. And so David Kirshner put the word out. He says, okay, I don't want this to be a typical Hanna-Barbera looking thing. He said, I'll put it out to anybody in the studio that wants to design it, but I don't want to know who did what. I'm like, okay. So I kind of went and drew the way I draw when I don't draw something that is like supposed to look like something. So I just kind of did my own version of it, my own take of it. And we put all the artwork out on the table. and he picked mine without knowing it was me. And it was like, okay, you're going to be doing the show. So I ended up storyboarding it. Davis Doy was the producer. I storyboarded it and I designed it, and it was pretty much all me. I think, well, I take it back. Lane Reichert did the second half. He boarded the second half of it. I did the first half. I did the wraparounds too at the beginning with the grandpa and the kids. But I was really proud of that special because it's so heartwarming. Dick Van Dyke did the voice of the grandpa in it, and I get to meet him. He was everything I wanted him to be. It was really nice. But I was really proud of that at Hanna-Barbera. That and Pup Scooby were like the only two things that I was really proud of. I mean, there were a lot of presentations that we did that never went anywhere, but that's, like you saw some of that stuff. But at Warner Brothers Freakazoid, I was really, really proud of doing. Superman, I was really proud of working on that. The 2 DVDs I did, the Scooby DVDs, I loved everything I did on those. And again, I go back and watch those and wish I had done certain things a certain way. What's New Scooby-Doo? Not really a big fan of that show because there was just so much that I didn't get out of it. And the way that they kind of postured it, it was just kind of hard to work on it. There was so many restrictions, and the way it came about, and the fact that I was kind of like, didn't get to be producer, because again, that's showbiz. But I was really counting on it because that's why I did the DVDs the way I did. Because I thought, okay, if they do a series, I'm the guy that's got to be doing it, and it didn't happen that way. Crypto the Superdog, probably one of my favorite things I've ever done. That is pure me and Ewo, and that is me taking Ewo back to his Frankenstein Jr. Impossible days. And to be honest, I love Ewo to death, but it was like pulling teeth to get him to draw that way again because he has been so honed in on doing the Scooby stuff and more illustrative type of stuff because he was doing a lot of stuff for licensing at that point. So he was like kind of loading the characters up with stuff. But for me to like strip everything away from that and say, no, remember how, and I would show him examples like this, like you did this. You go, oh, okay. And then he'd draw it that way. And I'm like, there you go. And, but I was more happy with the animation and the look of that show than anything that I'd ever worked on there. Some of the stories I wasn't really crazy about because they were just a little too, I don't know. I can't even say what the word is. They just weren't quite what I thought they should be premise wise. Some of them were just kind of just didn't have the oomph that the rest of the show had. And then I did the Tom and Jerry DVD, which was a lot of fun. It didn't come out exactly the way I wanted it because I just didn't get the animation crew that I wanted. And some of the stuff they dropped the ball on there. It was the advantage that I did have was I did get to animate some scenes in-house. So those scenes are really nice, but it pops back and forth sometimes. I was really proud of, after I left there, I worked on Secret Saturdays. Really proud of that show. It was like a real big departure for me, but I got along with the guy who created it really well, and we did a really good job on it. And I was really proud of that show. Some of the episodes, again, the animation kind of slipped, but there's some episodes that are just like, how did we do that? And it's just amazing to me. Earlier than that, Muppet Babies, I was very proud to work on because of the, and I got to meet Jim Henson and Frank Oz, and that was amazing. And Barbara Billingsley, who did the voice of Nanny. I don't know if you knew that or not, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. Get Along Gang, not so much. It was like it was my first show and kind of trial by fire, and I learned how to do everything on that show. And so funny, on that show, my title on that show was production assistant, which is basically somebody that just kind of like copies scripts and hands them out to people and makes sure that the show's running right and helps the producer. I thought that was the title I needed. I was really, to be honest, an associate producer on that show under Cullen. And I didn't realize that. He goes, are you sure that's what you want your title to be? I'm like, yeah, that's all it's got to be. I'm production assistant. That's what I am. That's all I've done for you. I've assisted your production. So he's like, well, and he knew I didn't know what, I don't think he didn't realize I didn't know what it meant. So when you look on my resume or you look on the titles, on the end credits, you see production assistant Scott Jeralds, and it's like, somebody even brought that up. You started out as a production assistant? I'm like, no, I didn't. I started out as a storyboard guy and did characters and everything else and layouts. Well, why are you a production assistant? I'm like, I don't know, and I finally realized later what that actually was. So that wasn't, that didn't do me any good to do that, but I thought that's what I needed. But yeah, just all the stuff I worked on. Like I said, I worked for Ruby and Spears for a little bit, doing freelance stuff for them. On Kangaroo, which was part of this Saturday Supercade show, and Alvin and the Chipmunks, and that led to other things with the Bagdasarians. Working on the Chipmunk Adventure, their big movie that they did. I worked on that a little bit. Ken Spears and Joe Ruby were really nice guys. They were a lot like Bill and Joe, but softer in a way, I guess, if that makes any sense. I mean, Bill Hanna was a really soft guy. Joe was just very Hollywood and old Hollywood, but he was, I mean, like I said, the first time I met him, I had like 5 minutes to get ready. And we were doing this. He was so obsessed with every one of those movies that he did at one point. I think it started in Yogi's First Christmas, but he always had to have a hermit or something, like a guy that lived in a cave. I mean, he was so obsessed with that. So one of the Scooby-Doo the Superstar 10 movies that I did had like a cave bear, an old bear that was a hermit that lived in a cave. I don't remember. It might have been Yogi's Great Escape, maybe. It was one of the Yogi Bear ones. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was oh gosh, the one with the aliens in it. I worked on that one. But it was like the last one we did. And last time that Dawes Butler did Yogi's voice too, before he passed away. But I brought this little cave bear in and I'd done it. He goes, yeah, that's pretty good. I know I've said this on video before, on interviews before, but he's like, yeah, that's pretty good. And he goes like, how long have you been drawn like that? How long have you been drawing? How long have you been doing this? I said, at the time, I said, about 4 years. He goes, yeah, well, this is the way we're going to do it today. And so he started drawing off to the side of it, like, this is the way I want it to look. And then when he got done with it, he goes, when you get done with this, take it past Ewo and see what he says. I was like, okay, all right, Joe, I'm in the same room with you and I've never met you before, but okay, I'll do whatever you say, But after that, I became really good friends with him and Bill. When I first got to be design supervisor, when Jane finally made me design supervisor, she took me around to everybody, and the difference between Bill and Joe, I went to Joe and it's like, is there anything that you want me to do? Anything that you need me to do to make the production go smoother for you and everything? He goes, yeah, we just hired Jerry Eisenberg back. I'm like, yeah. And Bob Singer, yeah, keep them busy. And that was it. I was like, okay. Now I'm going to go in and tell, these legends that I've been around, pretty much my whole career. Well, not even at that point. I'd only been there for a couple of years. Go in and tell them, it's like, would you guys mind like designing this character for me for this storyboard that you're doing? Because I kind of need it. But the difference between them and then, like, I went to Bill Hanna's office, I asked him the same question because he was more production oriented. He was the one that was kind of in charge of getting everything done. And I asked him the same question and he's like, well, why don't we just go out to lunch and talk about it? I'm like, really? We're going out to lunch? And he goes, yeah. He took me to this place he always goes to that was called the Old Ladies Home. And it was just this really like kind of old frilly, like antique-y looking place that we went to. And, he was sitting there and the water guy would come over and pour water. And we drove in his car. He drove his car. And I was like, oh my God. So, but the guy would come over and pour water and he was tipping the water guy, and it was like, this is like classy. I was like, who does, But he let me ask him every question I wanted to since I was like 8 years old. And just the gentlest guy in the world. I loved him so much. And it was just, like I said, and he was kind of taken back on how much I admired him. He just kind of really didn't know how to react to that. I was like, by this time, you're not used to that, that people kind of fawn over you. But he was very, he was one of those guys too, that if you had something going on, and you were up against the wall on something, he would actually come in, roll up his sleeves, and he'd jump right in with you, and do that stuff. And he was just that way, Whereas, like I said, Joe was a little more old Hollywood and had like reserved tables in every restaurant and went to, or we'd always, when we go to lunch with him, it was like we knew exactly where we were going and where we were going to be sitting and what we were going to be ordering, So it was that type of thing. Like I said, going to have lunch with Ewo and Jerry all the time was a lot of fun. you know, except when Ewo was driving, that was not fun because I'd be in the back seat sliding back and forth because he's like taking those curves pretty quick. But that's how he drove, you know. And Jerry would just, you know, like, hey Scott, how you doing? Ooh, you know, and I'm like, I'm not doing well, Jerry. I'm going to throw up in about 2 seconds. But then they take me to some place, like it was some like Asian place where like the soup smelled like, I don't know. He's like, isn't that good? I'm like, no, it's not. It's just, it tastes like, I don't know. It looked like dishwater and it kind of tasted, I don't even know what I'm eating. And it was kind of, you know, but they were just putting it down like it was like, you know, that's the last meal they were having. So yeah, I don't know. That was kind of fun. What else? Gosh, there's so much stuff. There's a lot of projects, like a lot of things I've worked on that nobody knows about. A lot of shows I've worked on that I just kind of did, you know, I helped out people that I knew or they needed help on. And I did like 3 or 4 episodes of storyboarded 3 or 4 episodes of Garfield. There was this one show called The Brothers Flub that was a syndicated show for a while. There's another show called Molly O, which was kind of on the verge of those, the way cartoons look now, that kind of round-eyed kidney mouth type thing. Worked on La La Loopsy. Gosh, I don't know, there's a lot of shows like that. There's a lot of, there's a lot of people I helped get into, you know, like again, paid forward and help them get up the ladder. A lot of people that are prominent, Joe Sitka, Tristan Cole. You know, because I mean, again, they had it. They just needed the window to get into it. They all knew what they were doing, and they're all amazing talents. Chris Battle was a guy that was working at. They opened up a Hanna-Barbera store at one of the malls, and he was working there. And the employees would go and get discount. You know, we would get a discount by going in there. And one day I was in there, and Chris was helping us. You know, helping us find stuff. Because they had, you know, they had a lot of merchandise. It was just specifically for that store. And Chris was helping me one time, and this guy comes out of the stock room and he's like, hey, Chris, tell him what you like to do. You know, show him some of your drawings. And he was like, oh, don't even, you know, like he was really embarrassed by it. And I'm like, really, you draw? He goes, yeah. I said, come down to the studio sometime. And I said, I'll look at your stuff. I'd love to. Well, and I went in there 2 or 3 times and still, you know, bugged him like, you got to come down and see, you know, let's see what you could do. And so he finally did. And at the time I didn't have anything for him, you know, but I looked at his stuff and I'm like, well, there's a lot of potential there. So flash forward, like we do, to when I worked at MGM, and it was just me, and I didn't have anybody else. And I thought about Chris. So I called him up and I was like, you gotta, you know, come in here and I'll hire you in a second on the spot. And you can do props for me and help me do characters. And then there's this girl that came out of nowhere named Diane Credenzer. And I know you guys probably aren't familiar with her, but she kind of, well, again, she was another one that I helped, you know, hone her career as far as doing storyboards and stuff like that. I started her off as a character designer at MGM. And, but anyway, get back to Chris. Chris tells the story every time, like how he got, you know, hired every time he has an interview. But he's like prominent. He's done like Teen Titans Go, Dexter's Lab. I mean, he is one of the top character designers now. He's worked on everything. But Diane Credenzer, different story. She just came to me and she just like, you know, I hired her on the spot too, because I was like really up against the wall. I needed to have people work on this thing. And everybody I knew was going out, either stayed at Hanna-Barbera or they were other places. I didn't really have a lot of people. So I was like, well, let me take 2 people that don't know anything and let's let them do it, you know? And I did get a lot of stuff, a lot of feedback up front that they weren't really crazy about what I was doing for Pink Panther. And I'm like, well, I'm the guy and this is as good as it gets. So if you don't like this, you better find somebody else. And they're, oh, no, you're the person. We'll make you get, you know, we'll get out of here what we need. So anyway, with Diane, she came in there and started as a character designer for me. And then we both went to Warner Brothers. I hired her back over there when I went over there as a director and had her do storyboards and helped her with that. And then, you know, she went off, she went to move back to New York where she was from, I think. And then she started working there and she sent me freelance gigs from there. And then she came up with these kids books. And there's one called Ollie and Moon. And there's another one that she just did called Super Buns. Ollie and Moon got to be made into a television show, into a series. and just out of nowhere. And I'm like, little Diane Credenzer, how did that happen to her? And then the same thing with, and she did the same thing with Super Buns. She's got a series on that now. So she's doing real well, not only in the kids book area, but in the series area too. So I'm very proud of her. Proud of Tristan. I'm proud of Joe. Trying to think of anybody else that I kind of helped. I mean, there were people that I went to school with that, I would give them, like make sure they were on my crew as much as we could, but yeah. But even, and I've told Wendy this too. It's like even back in the day with what she can do artistically, I told her I would have hired her on the spot. If she was around that back then when I needed somebody, because her stuff is amazing. And
I would love to see Wendy draw a series of Scooby-Doo. How can we make this happen?
God.
well,
Yeah, she needs to. Amen.
well,
Okay.
little do you know, her and I have kind of talked about a couple of things that we might collaborate on. So
Yeah.
not might, I think we're going to. I think that's pretty much a done deal that we're gonna.
Oh, that'll be
She-
awesome,
she's
and I
been- she's
can't
been-
wait for it to all come out.
Well, she's been kind of like I asked her a couple times, like to look at some of my retro covers that I've done, and she's again brought me back to where I need to be artistically. So, well, Wendy, you've got a really good eye, so I think you know what you're doing. So I don't think you know what you're doing. I know you know what you're doing. So I am, looking forward to some of that stuff that maybe that we'll probably be doing together. So it'll be good.
Scott, your designs are amazing, but if anybody else can capture Scooby-Doo like to where he needs to be originally, it is Wendy. And,
Oh,
and for anybody watching, no, I'm being serious. And for anybody watching this panel, you go check her out because she does amazing art. She's done art for Nikki. She's done art for Scott. She's done art for me. She's just an amazing artist. You need to hire her. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, Cameron's your agent now, so there you go. He's gonna get 10% of whatever you make. So there you
I'm
go.
putting my 2 weeks notice in my job. I'm coming to Canada.
Well, can I show off what one of our collabs is going to be? Because if we
Sure.
put it out there, then it'll get done. Okay.
Well, I hope so. I know you got other things to do, but I know you talked about doing.
So we did talk a lot about all of your Archie covers, but Scott did send me a very wonderful treasure, a cover that didn't actually get published.
Yep.
So here, we'll sit here. Okay. So
It's-
there's
it's-
like a little monster Scrappy. You see him?
Mhm.
Ooh.
Okay.
And Daphne,
That looks
Daphne
cool.
and Scooby and Shaggy are sliding down a sliding board, and then there's like a Mad Doctor up on the other
Yeah.
corner. There's
There it is.
so yeah.
Okay.
So that was a cover. For some reason, they gave it to me to do, and then the publisher was like, "Oh, wait a minute! I already had you do the cover for that issue, so I don't need that one." So I did actually 2 covers for that issue, and that one had nothing to do with anything. So he said, "Well, we don't need that one." So I have an extra cover that was never published.
Yeah.
So when I was talking to Wendy about some of these things, I showed that to her. She, "Oh, that'd be great," and then I sent it to her, and she's gonna paint it. We're gonna see what it looks like. Yeah,
That's awesome.
looking forward to that. That'll be fun.
That's great.
That'll be our first collab, I guess is the way you say it.
Yeah. Our first official collab.
Our official collab, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
And it's Scooby, so it's perfect.
it's Scooby. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a Scrappy on it. And Nikki, he's a monster
I
Scrappy.
know, it's great.
There we go. Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy.
It's got something for everybody, and that's the way it should. But yeah, I'm trying to think of other stuff. I mean, there's just so many things that I've
Well,
worked
Scott,
with.
I have a question.
Sure.
I wasn't the biggest fan of Freakazoid, but only because it kind of came on at a time where I didn't have as much time to watch animated shows anymore. So I just didn't really get to see much of it. But the one episode that I always loved, that I had no idea you actually worked on it, but it's my favorite one, Candlejack.
Oh
I
yeah.
love that.
Oh.
That is creepy.
Not supposed to say his name out loud.
Well,
Now he's gonna put
I
you.
mean, I can cancel it out. I can say Beetlejuice 3 times if you want, or I could get my dad involved and be like, "Dad, Candyman," and because he's so bad for that. We'll be sitting watching TV, and he'll just randomly Candyman. And I'm like, stop, just stop now. Just quit. I don't like that. Don't do that.
But no, that was one of my favorite. That was one of the first episodes I did, actually. It was that one. And I was really the stuff I went through on Freakazoid just to kind of get the lay of the land on that. It was pretty insane at the beginning of it, just trying to figure out what the show was going to be, because they were all figuring it out at the same time we were. And it was kind of like, you know how they used to say that, I don't know if you've seen interviews with like Chuck Jones and Friz Freleng and the guys that worked on the original Looney Tunes and Warner Brothers cartoons. They always said they made the cartoons for themselves, you know, but they were really kind of tuned into their audience. Not like today where people make cartoons for themselves and don't care about anybody but themselves. You know, you've got those guys that are like in their late 20s and sitting there with their feet up on their desk and just cracking themselves up because they just think they're so funny and clever. And then they're just actually like just, you know, not honoring the integrity of the franchise. And that's the way I'll put it this time. I usually say something else, but I'll clean it up for you. But anyway, but that's the thing that those guys used to say back in the day. That holds so true on Freakazoid because it was Tom Ruegger, John McCann, and Paul Rudd's vision. And I don't know what that was. I still, to this day, even after working on the show as long as I did, I don't know what that was. But we made those cartoons for they were their cartoons, and we made them for those guys. So that's as close as I've ever gotten to doing that type of Warner Brothers, you know, making a cartoon for yourself. And they did take the other audience into consideration because they weren't talking down to anybody. They were just being kooky, you know, about it. I mean, that show is just off the hook. I mean, it's just in every way. And it's all because of those guys. And they were all like improv comics that wrote for that show, pretty much. So that's what we got out of it. Same thing with like where they couldn't find. Oh, go ahead.
Is that the reason that I actually think it was part of like the second segment of the Candlejack episode, Toby Danger? Is that what it was called? Yeah. Which is, I mean, that is pretty, anybody who loves original Johnny Quest, yeah. They nailed that. Well,
a weird story behind that one. When I moved into my office at Warner Brothers, that storyboard was sitting on my desk. Somebody had already done it for a presentation for something else, and it wasn't going to be a part of Freakazoid. I looked at it and I'm like, this is genius. And I don't even remember who did. I think maybe Tom Minton and somebody else, maybe, who were one of the writers and the artists on it. And I saw this, and Mitch Schauer and I are huge. Mitch Schauer produced Freakazoid. We're huge Johnny Quest fans, both of us. I mean, I love Johnny Quest. And actually, Johnny Quest held up as the ultimate cartoon adventure show until Batman the Animated Series showed up. There wasn't anything that even compared to that. So that many years passed by before anything even touched that cartoon, you know, Johnny Quest, as far as what it did and you know what it represented. But anyway, I saw this Toby Danger thing and I took it into Mitch and I'm like, this is genius. I mean, you can make this. I didn't get to direct it, which ticked me off because I was on one other episode I think where Princess Diana and Sharon Stone were fighting over giving Freakazoid a kiss or something. I was like, why am I doing this? I should be doing the Toby Danger one. But the Toby Danger one was basically already storyboarded. All we had to do is just make it look like Johnny Quest. And we got some of the same. We got the guy who did the voice of Race at the time for Johnny Quest. He did the voice in Toby Danger. Oh. And then Don Mezek did Toby Danger's dad. So we had him do it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we used all the same sound effects. We had the characters go, "Aye," you know, when something happened, you know, and you know, when they were going to get hit by something. And it was great. It was really good. So yeah, I was glad I get, you know, I'll take credit for, I'll take credit for the reason that was made, because it was in my room and it was meant to be. So yeah, but it is a fun episode. It really is. I just, like I said, I'm sorry I didn't get to direct it, but yeah. So yeah, I don't know what else.
I didn't know you were a fan of Johnny Quest, Scott. That's cool.
I tell you what,
Johnny Quest.
I tell you what, 4 years old when that show came on, 4 and turning almost 5, because it came on in the summer, I think, or closer to the summer. watching that show at night. And, you know, in the summertime when the sun's kind of going down, you got a few hours to go outside and play after the show that's on at 6:30 is over because it's still light out. When I saw that Invisible Monster episode, number one, it scared the stuff out of me, you know, because it was like everybody was going to die. I mean, and there are episodes where people do die, and there's episodes where Johnny kills people, which I think was like, what? Now, by nowadays standards. But that episode, just that one and the very first episode with the frogmen, I love that one too, just because of the way the detail in that. But that Invisible Monster one was just, that was the most genius thing I'd ever seen. And it just, I remember running outside and I was like, I'm going to play Johnny Quest right now. I'm going to pretend, you know, and I'm just, you know, a little kid and, you know, didn't have any brothers or sisters or anything, but growing up. So I was just me by myself making it all up. But it was just amazing. And I still, and that episode still affects me, just like watching Scooby every time I see, you know, What a Night for Night, it still affects me the same way as when I was sitting in front of the TV at that age. You know, I still get that same feeling for it. So, but yeah, Johnny Quest, it's probably up in I'd say my top 5 favorite Hanna-Barbera shows. Got to be, you know,
for sure. Me and Wendy have gone back on the Johnny Quest shows, and it's funny because of course I love Scooby-Doo, but Johnny Quest is just up there, and it's funny because I have a little niece and nephew, and so my nephew, he wanted to watch a cartoon, so I always turn on Scooby-Doo, but I turned on Johnny Quest, and my sister's like, because there's one episode where he just pulls out a rifle and just shoots this like tiger or something.
Yeah.
My sister goes, did he just do that? I'm like, yeah, my nephew's gonna be fine. Just let him watch it. and it's a good cartoon, but he just pulls out a rifle, and I'm just like,
every one of those. I mean, there's not too many episodes in that's not watchable. I mean, some of them I like better than others, but there's not too many that I won't just sit down and watch just over and repeatedly. I mean,
right.
But yeah, I love that show. I love that show.
It's a good show.
I could be like Jerry now and go, ooh, what are we talking about next? What are you going to talk about? Ooh.
Wendy or Cameron, do you guys have any other questions?
Not really. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think you've answered everything. I will say one comment to you though. When Wendy brought it up in the very beginning, but when you did those your personalized comic book covers, I think my favorite one that you've done, and again, I know that you just did these yourself. They have been published.
Can I guess? Can I guess?
Please do.
Would it be possibly the Shmoo and Yabadoo, maybe?
Yes. Read my mind, man.
You know, to be honest, Cameron, you're the reason I did that one.
Really?
Yep.
Oh wow!
If it wasn't digital, I can send it. Well, I can print it out for you. I'll send you a print of it.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot. Thank you.
Did I tell you guys about my Emmy? Did I tell you about that? Won this a long time ago. Not a lot of people have these. Well, a lot of people have a lot of them. Somewhere, but yeah. No, you're the reason. Actually, you're the reason I did that cover because I was like, you know, because you're always talking about both of those shows. I was like, well, that's pretty much okay. That's a given. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, it means the world to me. Thank you. And I got to tell you, when you brought the Shmoo back, I immediately, when you posted it, I was just like in awe. I was like just struck. And I sent it to Wendy like immediately. And I said, oh my God. Of course, I should know, you being at Hanna-Barbera, but I'm like, this man knows who the new Shmoo is. Like every time I say the new Shmoo, people are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, no. It was a cartoon they did.
To be honest, I probably should have included the Shmoo in the Scooby Mega Mystery too. Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't, but I still can add him in. Not a problem.
Hey, there you go.
And Yabadoo as well. He's not on there either. But I was going to put I'm thinking about doing a retro cover with all the Do relatives solving a mystery. So
that would be cool.
I don't know what I would call it. I don't know. There's got to be a name. So I'll figure it out.
Something like with the family tree. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Something like that.
Really cool. Yeah.
What to call them? Like the do something do mystery solving do. I don't know. I'll think of something. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing that as a cover for sure. Because of you guys, because you keep bringing up the whole. In fact, you did a few weeks ago. You did that one panel that talked about all the family members, and I'm like, I didn't know about the clown one. I forgot about him. And or was it Dipsy Doo or whatever? What was his name? Is that it?
Whoopsie.
What
Dipsy Doo.
Dipsy do?
Dipsy Doo's better. I think I mean, but yeah, so I put him in it and put all of them in it, you know, just yeah. So that'll definitely be one of those covers at some point. I feel like I'm forgetting something, you know, that I need to talk about. I don't know. I need to be. I'm starting to feel like Jerry a lot right now. What do we talk about next?
I do have another question for you. So I know Nikki.
About breaking that record. I really am.
So I know Nikki and Wendy, they and me too. We all collect Scooby-Doo religiously. Do you? And I know you work on Scooby-Doo all the time, which is awesome. Like the comics are great. But do you still collect Scooby-Doo stuff? Like like let's just say you go vintage shopping or you go, walk into a thrift store. If you see something Scooby-Doo, like, are you hunting for it?
Hey,
I don't know.
You saw the fan favorite thing? You saw my bathroom? Do I need anything else?
The answer is always yes.
Yes,
Everyone, we all need more Scooby all the time.
I have
Always
boxes. I have boxes of Scooby stuff that I haven't unearthed in like 13 years because it's all been in storage. But I have a lot of Scooby stuff. I have things that probably you guys would really love to have that I just have in a box somewhere sitting in my storage right now. But
Cool.
some of your Grail items are probably in there, and I'll be happy to like send them to you because it's like I don't know where I'm going to put it. So yeah, and I've had it. It's just been sitting in a box for so long, so it's like why just leave it in the box, you know? So yeah. Anyway, but no, as far as still getting stuff, if I see something like I was at like a little roadside store, it's kind of they have these places between Vegas and California that when I drive over to see my kids, there's this little place called Charlie Brown's, and it's got all this retro stuff in it, all these just retro toys and soda and all kinds of stuff. It's like a little roadside, not a roadside place, but it's just a little like market type thing. They had like a smaller version of the Mystery Machine with Shaggy and Scooby standing beside it. I just bought that not long ago. I do have the big die-cast one that I love, that one. It's perfect, exactly what it should be. This one's not bad. It's just smaller. I don't know what the scale of it is, but it works pretty well. It looked pretty cool, so I bought that. So yeah, that's the first Scooby thing I bought in probably quite a while.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but I've got a lot of stuff. I mean, I got everybody that I set out to get voice-wise, like in the movies and everything else. It's like I got to work with them. And that was kind of cool. I got to see all the classic voice guys work, except for Dawes Butler. I ran into him one time in the elevator at Hanna-Barbera, and I just said, I love everything you've ever done. I didn't know what to say to him because it was early in my career, and I was just, whenever and I wasn't even like a producer or anything. I was just like a story, or just a character designer at that point. And I didn't even know if I could talk to him or not. It was like one of those like, oh, Dawes Butler. But then when I got to go to recording sessions, it was really cool, as far as that stuff. I have so many stories. When we did Addams Family, we had John Astin was Gomez. That was the first time he'd been Gomez in forever. Since the series, I think, or probably since Scooby-Doo movies was the last time he did it. And we brought him in, and he's sitting down. He came in by himself. He was like, he had to record late for some reason. And he sits down, and he's got the script in front of him on a stand, and he's going through it, and he starts delivering the lines. And we're all just like, okay, yeah, that's good, whatever. And then all of a sudden he goes, just a minute. And he stands up and he pushes the chair back and he takes off his members only jacket and he hangs it up and he starts hitting every Gomez pose he did in the series. Starts throwing his arms out and talking and like, you spoke French and all this other stuff and Tish and all this other stuff. And it was Gomez. And I was like, oh my gosh, just how he still had it. I mean, after all those years. And then later on, I ran into him at an autograph show. And I had drawn a publicity shot for him where he was sword fighting Gomez, the animated version from our series. And I saw that on his table. I'm like, oh, I drew that. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, I worked on the series. I said, did storyboards on it and character designs. And I said, I was fortunate enough to see you in your recordings and stuff. And And I said, I drew that picture. And he goes, oh my gosh. And he gave me his phone number. He said, if you have any other merchandise, come by my house and call me anytime. I'm like, oh, okay. So stuff like that. I'm finding that like with the celebrities, if you don't talk to them about anything that anybody else has ever mentioned to them, like you don't really talk to Mark Hamill about Star Wars. You bring up anything else. I went in there, Mark Hamill was in my Tom and Jerry movie. And he was talking about, I went in and I started talking to him about his first job was for Hanna-Barbera. And he did the voice of Corey on Genie, on the Genie cartoon. That was Mark Hamill. And I had the whole series duped off for him. And I gave it to him. He goes, where did you get those? I said, I worked at Hanna-Barbera. I had access to everything. He goes, that's great. He said, I can't find these. I want to show my kids. This is wonderful. And then we started talking about that. And he said the first job he ever had, and he said they came out in the hallway and they got him. And he said, okay, you're going to sing the theme song. And he's like, what, sing what? I don't sing. And they made him sing the theme song to the Genie show, to the Genie cartoon. That was his first thing he ever did. So he loved talking about that. And I was like, he was one of those people though that talk ahead of you, sort of. He's on to the next thing before you've asked whatever you're talking about. He was that way. Charles Nelson Riley was on that Tom and Jerry movie too. And he came in and he was a lot older than you would see him on Match Game. But I was like, okay, I'm a little shaky because he was kind of older. But he got behind that microphone and he started doing all the laughs the way he did. And it was just magic. It was just, that's what I love about Rip Taylor was the same way. Rip Taylor is a little bit, if you didn't tell him what you really needed, he kind of wouldn't. He just kind of do his normal voice, which was kind of weird because he was never doing his normal voice. He's always that persona that he did on stage. Working with Frank and Casey, like I said, that was just amazing. Trying to think of anybody else that was. When I worked on Static Shock, we had quite a few celebrities. We had Shaquille O'Neal, which was kind of cool. Gosh, there's so many. I mean, just working with the classic people too. When I worked on Fender Bender 500, we had all the classic people that were still alive. We had Gene Vanderpyle doing Winnie Witch. We had Alan Melvin doing Magilla Gorilla. Don Messick doing Boo Boo, and I think Pixie from Pixie and Dixie. Who else was on that? Paul Winchell doing Dastardly. Don Messick doing Muttley. I mean, it was just amazing. To be sitting in the same room watching those people, do those voices, especially watching Casey. I mean, Casey was so cool. He would never sit down. He would always stand up. And he did this thing where, and I actually put it on the storyboard. If you go back and look at Vampire Rocks, the Vampire, Legend of the Vampire, you go back and look at that. There's one scene where they say that they're going to the Outback, and Shaggy's like, I don't want to go to the Outback to see vampires. And he goes, yeah, but there's a lot of food. And he's like, food. And then he takes this pose where he bends his knees and he puts his hands straight down. His fingers are flared out like that. And he hits that pose. Casey does that pose when he was doing Shaggy, because he would always stand up and he would do it, would project the voice that way. So he was like, that's his way of like acting, So I actually took that pose and put it in the film. But yeah, he was such a nice guy. I really hated the way his life played out. It was just horrible, with the way everything. And I got really close to his family and stuff and went to the memorial service and everything. And that was really sad because of the way it all happened and went down. But he didn't deserve that. I mean, he was such a classy guy. And I got to go over his house. I went over his house at one time, and I had the big poster I did that had all those characters surrounding him. And I'd done a big print for him, like, I don't know, it's like movie poster size. And I went over and he sat down with his assistant and we're looking at it. And he goes, okay, name all of them. So when I tell people who they are, I'll know who they are. So I named them all. And then I said, okay. And I was getting ready to leave. I said, well, as long as you put that in a place of honor. And I'm like shaking my finger at him. He goes, oh, I'll show you where I'm putting it. I'm like, okay. So he takes me to this room in his house that was like a bar and like a kind of a, I don't know, it was kind of a bar area. But on the walls, there was like Muhammad Ali's boxing gloves that were signed by him. The Beatles drumhead was signed. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I'm going to put it right there. I'm like, you're going to put it in here with all this other stuff? No, you know. So I was very flattered by that, you know, and I told his kids that story after when he passed away, and they were like, well, that's the way my dad was, you know, and he was just like, but the way he said it, you know, after I said, I want you to put it in a place of honor, he goes, and I'm going to show you exactly where I'm going to put it. You know, the way he said it in that Casey Kasem type voice, you know, and it was just, you know, it was something else. You know, I mean, again, living in the Midwest and on the Sunday afternoon, listening to the American Top 40, laying on my bed, listening to the songs and hearing his stories in between. And then actually, you know, being in his house and having him know my name. Oh, the other thing too, every time he would do an interview, he would call me because he'd have a list of questions. He goes, okay, I need help, you know, answering these questions. So I'd answer the phone and it's like, hi, Scott, this is Casey. I'm like, okay. And then, you know, he's like, okay, I need these questions answered. So I tell him the answers. I would see the interview. He would say it word for word what I said. And then right before he retired, he calls me up. The phone rings like at like 5 o'clock. And he goes, okay, he said, do you have the news on? I'm like, who is this? You know, it's like, you know, I know it's so funny. But he was like, this is Casey. He said, do you have the news on? I'm like, no. I said, he goes, watch the report at 6 o'clock on the national news because I'm making an announcement, and I used the picture that you sent me or that you gave me. I used that on the interview. Or yeah, I said, oh, okay. I said, that's fine. And what it was announcing his retirement, you know, because he was ready to hang it up. And I was watching it, and I was like, he called me to tell me that, to call me to tell me that. I called him back, and I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? He goes, yeah, it's time. I'm like, really? You really want to do this? You know, but to have that kind of conversation with him, you know, that was just, I still like pinch myself because it's like how, you know, again, somebody that came from this little farm town in the Midwest, and then, you know, everybody said, oh, Scott, you got to live your dream. And it's like, we always knew you could do it. I'm like, you know, we always knew you'd be successful. I'm like, well, I'm glad somebody did because I never really thought in the back of my head that this was ever going to happen. But I couldn't do anything else. So it's like, you know, I'm glad that it worked out, you know, so, but yeah, I was trying to think of anything else. Ooh, what else can we talk about? Ooh, I don't know. I'm giving you as much stuff as we can here. Didn't break the record, but we tried. So
when we did the 5.5 hours, and it's funny because most of that was the actual panel. I think the Scrappy panel was like 3 hours or 3.5 hours.
So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was.
What was the one that you did 5.5 hours on?
It was the Scrappy one that the total recording was 5.
Of course it was. Of course it was the Scrappy one. Oh, it could be. Of course it was. Okay.
It got heated.
Well, that happens.
I think I had to hold up Flim Flam for that one.
Couple times, yeah.
Yeah, nobody listened though. Flim Flam was supposed to be our moderator. I taped him to a pencil. So when I held him up, that was supposed to be like, okay, stop, like yelling, whatever. But everyone ignored him.
I would be talking, and then I would just see Flim Flam's eyes just kind of barely pop the screen at him, and I'm like, all right, I got to shut up now.
Well, I'm really glad you guys included me in this. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry it took so long, but I really appreciate it because it's really something I always wanted to do.
We're very excited to have you on the panel and to talk to you and to hear your stories. And you've had just this amazing career. And for me, it means so much more that not just that you worked on Scooby, but that you are a fan of Scooby.
Yep.
And it just brings that to a whole different level for me.
Well, to be honest, I know a lot of you like that Scooby-Doo show. I really didn't see that show that much because I hate to say it because I know, you know, I'll probably get a look or something for a couple people. Man, I know for one for sure. But the Scooby-Doo show, because number one, because they messed up the main title sequence. That was number one. The second thing was because Velma's voice was not the same. So when I'm 16 years old and I'm sitting down watching this thing, it's like, this isn't my Scooby. What happened? Where's Velma's voice? It's not working. So I boycotted that show and I didn't really watch it at all until just maybe not till that long ago. I started really kind of sitting down and watching the episodes, and I do know a story behind that one, and I'll try to make it. Well, I will make it brief because we can break the record. Ruby and Spears were working for ABC at that point. They were being the kind of the execs on deciding children's programming. And they did a lot of stuff with the Crofts, the Croft Super Show with Wonderbug and Magic Mongo and Electro Woman and Dyna Girl. Ruby and Spears came up with all that stuff. So they were kind of the blanket over everything at ABC. When the Scooby-Doo show, that was their big leap to ABC from CBS in 1976. And they were doing all new episodes, and Dynamite, it was Scooby and Dynamite, wasn't it? Or was it just Scooby? Scooby and Dynamite that year, wasn't it? On 76? Wasn't that the first year that those two were?
I believe it was a Scooby and Dynamite show. Yes, I believe.
But it was this like Scooby-Doo show, and then they had Dynamite by itself. But it was an overall hour of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess Ken and Joe weren't really happy with the way those episodes were coming out because it didn't feel like the original Scooby. So if you watch around episode 5, all that kind of melodic music in the background kind of disappears, and they start using all the old cues from the original show, and it starts feeling like it, and they start putting a lot of those little gags in, like, oh, I'm not saying it happened on Scooby-Doo show, but like originally, like when Shaggy jumped on Scooby's back and revved him up like a motorcycle and they took off, they put more of that type of stuff in it, you know, to make it more of that type of show. Because like I said, Joe and Ken weren't really happy with it wasn't Scooby enough for them, I guess. But it was so funny when we were, Nicole was still kind of on the fence about coming in to do Legend of the Vampire. And I was in recording. We'd already started recording with Heather and Frank and Casey. So we weren't really sure that Nicole was going to happen. But then she was like, well, I want to do it by myself because I haven't done it for so long. And if I do it, and we weren't sure if we were going to get her. So Heather comes up to me and she goes, was it Pat Stevens was the voice in the 76 show, wasn't it? Okay. She comes up and she goes, well, I know I can get Pat Stevens. I know that she would be more than happy to come back and do it. And I must have shot her a look like, are you out of your mind? There's no way I'd use Pat Stevens. She's the reason I didn't watch that show in 76 in the first place. I didn't say it, but I felt horrible after that because it's not that bad. I've gotten used to it, you know, after time. I've gotten used to it.
I think that you're underselling that a little bit. I think what you told me was that it was starting to grow on you. That you were starting to like it because it wasn't so bad. That's my recollection of that.
You're probably right.
I'm always right.
You're always right. Okay. All right. There you go. But anyway, so yeah, that's my Scooby-Doo show. I like Dynamite a lot though. I love Dynamite. I thought that was really cool. But I had nothing else to compare it to. So anyway. But I do watch that show now. I watch it. I still watch the original show a lot. I still watch that run quite a bit. And I go back and watch my DVDs all the time saying, why didn't I do this better? Why didn't this work out? My favorite part of the DVDs, though, out of all the stuff I did, that Getaway song, that is my favorite thing. The story behind that, when I had to spend all my years of life on the freeway, going back and forth from my job to my house. And I don't know how many years of my life I wasted on that freeway. I would listen to a lot of music. And Veruca Salt was one of my favorite bands of all time. The two girls, Veruca Salt. And they did like I can't even think of the name of the songs. I don't know. Anyway, just a big fan. So when I was listening to those songs away, I'm like, wouldn't it be great to have like a Scooby chase scene with that kind of music behind it? I just thought that would be great. So when we got to that song, I told Rich, I said, because he was always like trying to find like, what's the proper, mood for it? What do you want? I said, I want this to sound as much like Veruca Salt as you can possibly get away with. And he did. So, and I don't know why we didn't even just go to Veruca Salt. We probably could have. They probably would have been more than happy to have done it, but I just didn't even think about it. Same thing in Vampire. I wanted so bad for Mickey Dolenz to do the voice of the manager of Wild Wind. And I came really close, but he was on tour and I couldn't get him. And I was so upset because I was like, we didn't really have any like marquee value people in that one, that had done voices or that were, a little more prominent. So anyway, I'm so happy that you guys got together and did this. It just means the world to me that, and again, if there's ever any panels that you think I could lend anything to, I'd be more than happy to come on,
Yeah.
if you see fit. So I'm throwing that out there. I could be your resident pro if, if that's what you like.
All right.
Yeah.
Have that recorded. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a promise. I'll do it. Nope.
That would be great.
I can bring anything to the table. Just don't throw me into one of those trivia things because I know I'm good because I did score pretty high on the one that you guys did, but I don't know, under pressure I might just crack. I don't know. So
That's the thing. Like I can answer trivia, but if I had to do it the way that like I do it on the panel, I would never be able to answer them. That's why I host.
well, that's a good place to be. It's a good place to be. But no, I love what you guys have done. It's just you're so thorough and you're so, you talk about it. I know you all love it, and you just talk about it like, it's just really comfortable for you to talk about it, and you're just, you're so knowledgeable about everything, about it. And I can make any reference or any, about it, and you guys know what I'm talking about. Just even like sometimes I'm like, what was this episode or who did this voice? And you guys, oh, it was this, So I really appreciate that, You guys really put you're really doing your homework before you have people on, and I think that's great. Oh, there's the other thing. I didn't hold this up. This was what are we going to talk about next? This was a presentation board from
Oh
Scooby.
yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I did.
Oh.
Me and Evo did all of this, so I think maybe somebody else did a couple other ones, but anyway. Yeah. So that's a copy. It's not the original. I wish I had the original, but that's a copy of it. But
Still beautiful though.
Cool.
yeah, came out nice. I have a few more things like that laying around, but I don't know. Some of them are just put up in boxes and I can't find them. It's a big search. That's what took me so long to find the stuff that I did to show you, because I was like, where are those?
Yeah. We did talk to Charles Grosvenor.
Charlie's a good guy. I worked with Charlie forever, and he gave me more work probably than anybody throughout the years. I mean, he's the sweetest guy in the world, and we always had a lot of fun. We both worked on Pink Panther at the same time because we both left Hanna-Barbera at the same time. And we had this thing with lunch where we go to lunch at this like pizza place, and he would always order this pizza, but it had Roman tomatoes on it, and he'd be like, "I want it without the Roman tomatoes." He had this speech to the waitress every time, and I just sit there and like just bang my head on the table like every time because he just said order. He'd say it the same exact way every time, and it became like a kind of a running gag between us. But it was kind of fun. But yeah, he and I had a lot. We did a lot of stuff together. I did a lot of shows, storyboarded a lot of stuff for him. So he's a good guy. One of my favorite people that I've ever worked with, which are far from few between for all you people out there watching. You know who you are. I'm kidding. Am I really? I don't know. But, yeah. Nope.
And I know you touched about your experiences at Hanna-Barbera, but I could just I bet it was just magic walking into that building. My God, I hate that it's torn down now. I mean, I hate that.
No, they just retrofitted it. I mean,
that's right.
I can look at where my office was, and it's like you can see a gymnasium in there, and I'm like, no.
Oh, that's right. It's a gymnasium. I forgot. Yeah,
Yeah,
hate that.
The annex building has been turned into that. It was so funny. The first time I got to go there, I was at Cal Arts, and they had an art school or an art class at night, and to go in there, and I was like, walking through the hallways of this place, I'm like, I'm actually in the building. I got through the gate, I'm in the building, and now we're going to this recording room where we're going to sit, and it's like a theater room, and we're going to sit, and these people are going to come out and talk to us. And it was like Bob Singer, it was Ewo, it was Art Scott, who was a producer. Harry Love was the man who ran the classes, and I really don't know what Harry did, but a lot of people do. But Anyway, he would always like preface everything by saying, we're not hiring. If you're not in the union, you're not going to get a job, and you can't get a job without being in the union. And we're like, well, wait a minute, that's catch-22. But he's like, and we've got producers here, their names are on the building, so we're not looking for anybody, but we're just teaching these classes. And they more or less set the classes up for people who already worked there, because there were a lot of those people there. But because we were at Cal Arts, we got to come. So that was my first exposure to EWO. Was my first exposure to Bob Singer. And Art Scott was really probably the only one that could have given me a job, because the other two weren't really thrilled about it. So Bob Singer gave us a character design assignment, and it was designed like a polar bear and a penguin for a cartoon show. And then the other one was, which they've never done that before. And then there was another like teenage characters, like kind of a Josie and the Pussycats, but a little more edge on it. So that's kind of the style I went with, Hanna-Barbera, traditional Hanna-Barbera. Bob Singer's first comment out of the box, like pulls my stuff up and holds it up, critiques it. Yeah, we're looking for stuff that's a little more inventive. A little more not as Hanna-Barbera driven. We're always looking for something new. And that wasn't what I gave him. So that was strike one. Strike two, EWO didn't even give us an assignment. He just talked about how amazing he was, and all the presentation boards were sitting up behind him. And I was just going in after class. I got to go up, and he was talking to other people. I was too shy to even say anything to him. But Art Scott, who was a producer, he gave us a storyboard assignment. And one, he gave us like a page of Flintstone script that we did, and the other one was just make something up that you want to do. Well, at the time, I thought, I'll do something. I'll do Donkey Kong. I'll take that because that's a thing, and it could be a show, because I think they had done Pac-Man at that point. I'm like, the next obvious thing would be Donkey Kong, not knowing that Ruby Spears was doing Donkey Kong at that same time. So I hand that in, not knowing anything about it. Didn't even look like those characters from Ruby and Spears. And Art Scott's comment when they handed it back the next week was like, obviously Scott's the storyboard man, and he knows what he's doing. And, he just all this praise about not prompted in anything, and he knows what he's doing and all this other stuff. And he wrote that on my envelope where my thing was. And I took it to Harry Love, and I'm like, look at this. This is what he thinks of my stuff. Yeah, well, we're not hiring storyboard people here. They all work freelance anyway, so don't worry about it. Now, had it clicked and I called Art Scott on the phone and said, hey, I'm the one that turned that in, and would you mind trying me out on a job? He probably would have given me one in a second. But did I have that kind of foresight to do that? No, I did not at the time. So yeah, but that was the first time going into that studio. And then after that, when I finally got to be there, it was like I'd come home. It was like family, Everybody was just so nice. And it did kind of get kind of goofy after when Turner started moving in about bringing their people in and stuff. And there were, granted, there was a couple incidents that I had there that just, because I was a supervisor, and there were things that went along with that just didn't turn out too good. But for the most part, I can't complain. It was, it was the best of times. It was kind of the worst of times sometimes, but not the good outweighed the bad completely working there. Cause that's the only place I ever wanted to work. And it was really hard to leave there too when I did. I mean, I just kind of quit when it was time to quit. It was just like Turner had come in, and it just kind of wasn't going to be the same company. And I just didn't agree with a lot of stuff that was going to happen. So it was time to leave, which was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, But I enjoyed my time there. I'm glad I was there when I was there, because it was just, kind of the tail end of all the really good guys all the older guys that worked there, and being able to learn from them, So yeah.
What happened to all of the old or Hanna-Barbera, Warner Brothers stuff? Like, it's got to be somewhere. Somebody has to have it, all the storyboards and all the
Oh yeah, they do.
like,
They do. Trust me, they do.
why would they not create a museum? I mean, it doesn't have to be just Scooby, but
Yeah, they have some of that stuff at the Warner Brothers tour, backlot tour. They have a room where they have some of that stuff kind of hanging up, or they have cells and storyboards and things like that, just to kind of show the process of back in the day. They have some of that stuff there. When I was there, because I was in charge of it all, we kept all of the presentation boards down in the basement and big flat folders, flat files, and in big like filing cabinets. And then they also had another out in the warehouse building. They had all the scripts and some of the models stored out there. So they do have all that stuff. It just went to this place called Iron Mountain. That is like the place where Warner Brothers has all this archive stuff for a while. I don't know if it's still there now. I think they have it on the lot now. They moved it all there, I think. I'm not really sure. When we were moving from one building to another, when they were moving Hanna-Barbera into Warner Brothers, I was walking by a cubicle that was next to my office one day, and I look over and I see all these boxes of tapes, of like reel-to-reel tapes. I'm like, what is this? And I look at it, and it's all the music cues from every Hanna-Barbera show from like 1958 or 57 all the way up till like the 80s. I'm like, what are these doing here? If somebody finds these, they're going to put them on eBay. So I called Tim Iverson, who was in charge of, all that stuff. And I'm like, Tim, this is, we can't sit out here. He goes, oh my gosh. He said, thank you for finding that. He said, we didn't know what happened to it. And it's just somebody had just like taken it and just laid it there, for whatever reason. And so it was really nice because at the time they took all those and they were going to transfer them off for Hoyt Curtin's family, for his relatives. And it was really nice that they made copies of them for me because I found them. So I've got, they did stop like around 1970, I think 1970 or 71, because they ran out of money for it to fund it because they were using some sort of like budgetary thing. And so I only got everything up through like 1970 or 72, somewhere in there. I do have all the music cues from the Scooby-Doo show, so I got those later because I wanted to make sure I had that, that little piece that they always played that I liked. That's kind of like, the part of the theme song sort of. But yeah, I have all those on cassette and I think on CD too, I think. I don't know, I have to go back and look. But it's kind of funny because whenever I see they'll turn up on YouTube, I'm like, where did they get those? Because I thought I was the only one that had those, so. But yeah, I don't know how people get a hold of that stuff. Because like Wendy showed me the other day that she had our prop book from the second season of Scooby to Pup Scooby, and I'm like, who had that? That was just made for everybody in the house. It's a book that I have. I have like 3 or 4 copies of it. I'm like, where did that? Who got that? How did that sneak out? So everybody has something. Yes, but it's just odd how all that stuff kind of leaks out. Because there's one I think on YouTube. There's all the Johnny Quest cues, all the music cues for Johnny Quest somewhere. And I'm like, how did they get those?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
It's a shame they didn't turn the Hanna-Barbera studio into a museum.
Yeah,
that would have been just truly a treasure to go to.
They turned the back parking lot, and I don't know how they did it. They put all these apartment buildings in there, the apartment complex, and I'm like, okay. And they're using the actual building for like office space, I guess. But they put these apartment, and in the apartment building they have kind of like these really kind of crap murals of the Hanna-Barbera characters in the hallways, and they don't look like they were, they're not that great. But to be honest, I did look into living there at one point, and it was pretty pricey. It was like I think about almost $3,300 or $3,500 a month to live there. To live next to the freeway. That's where you would be. It's back right to the freeway. And I was like, my gosh, I think it started at $2,500 or something like that. But it went up to that. And I did look, like I said, I toyed around with it for a bit, just like, okay, I need to go back there. I need to live there. But I kind of passed on it because I really couldn't afford that. I could barely afford where I was living anyway. So, but it was a thought for about 5 seconds. But yeah, they just, and then they, like I said, they turned the annex building into I don't know what kind of gym it is. It's like one of those total gyms, or I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's just sad to see. It's hard for me to drive past it without getting teared up. But It was so funny when I did finally leave Hanna-Barbera. This is bad. But I had these 3 guys that work for me, Lance Falk. I think you've had Lance on the panel, right? Okay. Yeah. Eric Clark and Scott Hill were 3 of my main guys. And Lance was actually responsible for getting me hired there. He was nice enough to make sure that I got in that place. But it was almost like a scene out of like the last episode of MASH. And I came at Christmas time, and I brought my oldest daughter, and we always handed out these candy canes that we got that had like M&Ms in them. And we'd always go hang them on. If the people were already gone on vacation, we'd always put them on their door and stuff so they have them when they got back. And I told everybody goodbye because that was my last day. Christmas Day was, or Christmas Eve was my last day there. And so I get back in the car, and but my daughter's in the car, and she falls asleep immediately because she's only like 4 or 5 years old at the time, I think. And to get on the freeway, you had to go up the hill to go towards Universal, and there was an on-ramp. So as I'm going out the driveway, I go out the driveway, and I go up the hill, and I start to go up the hill, and I look down to where I used to park, and Scott Hill and Eric Clark and Lance Falk are sitting there saluting me. As I'm driving slowly up the hill, I cried like a baby. You have no idea. I almost wrecked the car. I was so like tore up at that point because it was like that was it, you know. Then when they decided that, you know, Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera were going to merge, Hanna-Barbera was still being used as a studio. It's just that because of the earthquake that we had, it was kind of not safe to be in as much. But they had a party the last day of the studio being open, and Bill and Joe were there, and everybody got a picture with them. And it was just free reign. You could go anywhere. And I hadn't been in that studio. They changed it quite a bit, put a lot of fire doors up and stuff. And I kind of got lost a couple of times going around it because I was like, oh, this isn't what it used to look like. But I ran up, me and Tristan and Scott Ollie, who was a very good friend of mine. We ran up to the penthouse where Bill Hanna's office was and went out and got our pictures taken underneath the sign. You know, took turns doing that. And but we ran up really fast before anybody figured out what we were doing because I didn't know if we should be up there or not. But we did that, and they had a really nice party. But it was just sad. You know, I got a really nice picture with Ewo and Jerry there, which was nice. But that was a sad, sad day. That was the last day that we were all there. But anyway, but yeah, it is sad to drive by it now and just. I always, whenever I go by, it's like a moment of silence time for me. You know, so that's that was my campus. That was my my training ground. You know.
Cam, you got to do the heart thing, and then the hearts will fly up.
Yeah, where's that at?
Oh yes, hang on. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. For that. That makes it all worthwhile. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I don't feel bad anymore. I won't cry when I go past Hanna-Barbera anymore. Just thank you. Appreciate it. So anyway. So,
You guys have any other questions?
you guys are done with me. You're all done with me. I know you are.
No, I do have a compliment though. I will say.
When are you going to get this chance again? Come on.
I know. I just want to say, Scott, you're a phenomenal person, and we're just truly blessed to have you in our lives. Thank you for still keeping your hands dipped in Scooby-Doo and keeping them pure and clean. I know the three of us were very big fans of Scooby-Doo, but we love that. We love our Scooby-Doo. We love what he stands and symbolizes. So all I can say is thank you. Thank you for doing this with us. And thank you guys for having me back on. I appreciate it. So.
I am just blown away that anything I did, because I didn't look at it that way, but anything I did influenced you guys, or you liked what I did, or in Wendy's case, she was like, kind of made her want to do that for a career as well, So that means a lot more to me than you ever know, that you guys were that Wendy being influenced, but just you appreciate what I did. And I don't hear that a lot, and you just don't really realize it when you're working on stuff. When you have these people on, they don't realize what kind of impact they really had, myself included in that. Because I was just, I was just trying to stay employed, on some level, but I really loved what I did. And I was really, really happy to get to do what I did. But to have it make, some kind of impression on somebody, that means so much to me, and I just can't thank you guys enough for still loving it as old as you are, and everything. And it just, it had that kind of influence on you and everything. So thank you.
Thank you for all your years of working on Scooby-Doo and allowing us to love Scooby as long as we have.
Well, we're pretty lucky in that regard. I don't think he's going anywhere, even though, I don't know where it's going with him right now, but
It's scary to think where they're going with him now, but
I did hear Tristan say that she may or may not have done some sort of development work on something new with Scooby. So she couldn't really talk about it, but who knows? Who knows where that's going, I
yeah.
don't know. I don't know. So,
Well, thankfully we have access to all the classic stuff, so people can enjoy whatever crud they want that's new, and we'll just stick to the classics. Whatever.
There you go.
absolutely. Yep. You're right on that one for sure. But yeah, I wish I would have got to do a couple more of those with the original cast and everything. I would have really loved to have just done a whole series of like maybe at least 4 or 5 of those, because I kind of kicked myself that I didn't go back and watch the original series enough, because I go back now watching the original series. I'm like, I should have done that. I should have done that. I just wanted the pacing of it and stuff to be a little more like the original series was. But yeah, got as close as I could get, I guess, with what I had to work with and the time frame that I didn't have to work on, and the budget. I mean, we did get to make the animation a lot better than the original. Well, I don't know. Sometimes the less is more in that original series, that they just didn't move stuff around that much, and it works a lot better because I can sit and look at those drawings a lot longer, but they don't move. So yeah. Anyway, that would be something too. I'd always get kicked out of editing sessions, especially the first year of Pup Scooby, because we would pour everything into those storyboards and models, and then you'd see the animation come back. And there was like one guy that drew really well, and he did all the like really kind of key scenes, and then when it would like pop to like some of the animation that just wasn't there, I would be in the back room going, oh, and then I got kind of thrown out and told that like when the network gets here, you can't talk like that. You can't say anything like that because we can't let them think it's not good. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I just didn't go. So yeah, because I don't know. I don't stay quiet about stuff like that. If something doesn't work, when we did Monster of Mexico, we got the thing in and they did a test for us. I'm like, this is amazing and it's going to be great and I can't wait to see it. And then I guess they got another job with another studio that paid them more because they took all their really good guys off and put them on that, and then they put like the E team on my stuff, and I got the show back, and I was like, this is like subpar Saturday morning stuff, So I went to the president of Warner the Animation, and I showed it to him, and I said, we can't do this, I can't let this go, it's got to be redone. So he, kind of went along with me and said, whatever you need to do. And he was kind of into like kind of shaping those overseas studios into shape so they wouldn't kind of shortchange us, I guess. And it was kind of tricky too, because we'd always have because I don't fly, I don't like to fly. So they would always bring their people over to us and they'd have an interpreter and you're talking to them and the interpreter says whatever. And you don't know if they're saying what you need them to say or not, because I don't speak Korean, or Taiwanese or whatever. But they did they did an okay job when they sent us the thing back. But I basically had it animated twice, and that put us a little bit behind. I think that's why that second one is a little bit later, as far as it's almost on top of when they released What's New, I think. When that was, or maybe it's after, I don't remember. But we had some production problems with that one, so that's that one. That's that story. See, you keep me on here long enough, you're going to get everything.
The more, the better. That's
Okay.
how we are on the panel. You can talk for hours and we will just listen happily.
I don't know if my voice is going to hold up any longer, but I mean, there's some other stuff on the retro page that's coming up this year that I haven't done before. I'm going to kind of branch out a little bit and do some other things instead of just covers.
Oh,
So,
nice.
all got that to look forward to. So there you go.
Scott, thank you so much for coming on the panel. We really appreciate it. We have had a great time listening to you talk, listening to your stories, learning about your career. This has been amazing. Thank you so, so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love the fact that you guys are doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A huge shout out to our patrons, Julie Rosen, Ross from ScoobyFan.net, Tagus, and Elizabeth Maloney. If you would like to support the Scooby panel, please go to patreon.com/ScoobyAddicts. A very special thank you to Emmy-winning animation producer, director, and comic book artist Scott Jeralds, artist, blogger, and Scooby collector Wendy BRYDGE, and Cameron Bates from Scooby-Doo and Cameron 2. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms or as a web series on YouTube. You can find Scooby Panel on Instagram, Facebook, and X as @ScoobyPanel. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Addicts artwork by Will Davenport. Video editing by Nikki Blake. Music composed and performed by Bovine Nightmares. Please join us next time for another Scooby panel.